Good evening, everyone. 7:35. Today's going to be an exciting meeting. It is Wednesday, November 2nd, 7:35. We have a couple of technical difficulties, but we should be okay. Let's start with the pledge and then we will start the meeting. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Trustee Fritchie,
Present.
trustee Lopez,
Present.
trustee White. Present. Trustee Quesada,
Present.
Mayor Lovett.
Present.
Do we have mayors and trustees announcements?
I think we do. Yeah. Well, I don't know, but you said you had, so.
Yeah, no, I only have one announcement. It's actually a little bit more for the Spanish community, specific for the Ecuadorian community and the people from Cuenca. They actually are going to be celebrating tomorrow. November 3rd is Independence Day of Cuenca. And I was unfortunately enough to be there last week for about a few days. And they already started some preparations on that. It looked like it was going to be a fun portion of that. I know Peekskill, because they do have a sister city with them right now. They are doing some celebrations, I think, over the weekend as well. So happy Independence Day for the people from Cuenca. That's pretty much it. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Trustee announcements. I'm feeling that there are. Anybody to my left? Dana, anything? Okay. Well, we know that the staff, police, fire, the whole gang was out there for Halloween. Some of us were there. And it was a lot of fun. I think the village did a great job on Main Street. Every year it's a little different, and COVID sort of put a damper on things. I thoroughly enjoyed having my sugar fit all night. All the candy. It was a lot of fun, and it was safe. And I thank everybody for their involvement. Every year they'll get bigger and better, I think. Also, Deputy Mayor Quesada, as he said, was in Ecuador with your daughter, right? And we have a Hispanic community. It's a weird word to begin with because I think it was started like in the mid-'80s by Nixon about sort of categorizing everyone that comes in from Latin America. Obviously, everybody comes from different countries, different cultures, different, frankly, everything. But here in this country, we categorize together. But in Ossining, a huge portion of our community, of the Hispanic community, actually comes from Ecuador, and specifically from that region. So I think that's really cool that you went there. You promised pictures. I'm not seeing any pictures, but because I've never been to Ecuador. I'd be really interested to see what it looks like. I'm sure others would as well. So thank you for that. And I think that what is interesting tonight is we're going to get to see the budget. One of the things that only the 5 trustees do during the year, and it's only the trustees that could do this, is have the responsibility for the budget for the upcoming year. We spent some time on our last session getting a third quarter year-to-date update from the manager, which was very exciting for those of you that get excited about things like that. I know I do, about the many initiatives that we're doing. We have received, that's the wrong word. We have worked really hard, the village staff and the electeds, to get grants so that we're using state and federal dollars to support major initiatives that a small village like ours would never be able to do on its own. Even if we raise taxes, we would never be able to do it. That's the reality of it. So we appreciate our electeds and our representatives in the other branches of the government. But most importantly, we look like we're at $12 million of being able to fund major multi-year initiatives that were discussed last week. We're hoping to get another 8 million in the next couple or so months. I'm going to be ecstatic to be able to announce that, I hope soon. And all of this allows us to really begin major infrastructure improvements, community center, waterfront housing, business development, all sorts of great stuff. So that was fun. The fun thing tonight is now we're going to look at what we're doing for the upcoming year, how the village staff, all the department heads meet. Also, the fire chiefs meet with the village manager, legal department, police department, all of these departments report to, through the village. And some of the things you do is with IMAs. All of that is to say that today we will get a glimpse of and be handed a budget that over the next couple of weeks or so, we will be doing all day sessions, evening sessions, etc., all of which are open to the public viewing, to really see where the staff is recommending that we look at capital improvements budgets as well as operating budgets, and ask a lot of questions. If the public has questions, they should be emailing it to bot@villageofossining.org. If you have questions, if you see this, we will be happy to answer them. And so we're excited to see what you have come up with for this really sort of interesting year. As we just spent 2 years in COVID, it's interesting now to see what you're recommending that we look at, that we do. And then the village board will decide which items they want to continue with, which they might not want to, et cetera, et cetera. Exciting stuff. I think that's it. Let us get started. Martha?
Thank you, Martha. Good evening, everyone. And as the mayor stated, we do have it's a high point of the year to present the tentative budget to the Board of Trustees and the public. I want to thank Dale Brennan, our treasurer, for the enormous amount of effort that she puts into this. This is months in the making. She does an excellent job, and along with her staff and the department heads who really worked really hard, because we're coming out of 2 years of COVID, but we also know we're facing some additional challenges. And while we're happy that we're seeing the pandemic begin to wane, we are concerned about rising costs, about inflation, and the impact that that's going to have on budgets going forward. So a lot of consideration was given to that during the budget planning process, and we will talk about how that's reflected in the plan. Jamie, if you could put up the presentation, please, that would be great.
We're gonna have to move, I think, right?
Yep, here we go. Why isn't it? Here we go.
Do we want to turn off the dais lights just because it's a little?
Sure.
That better?
For us,
For everybody.
It's better, for me, it's just not to have lights in my
Yeah.
face, but yeah.
The rotisserie lights.
Okay.
So Jamie, if you just want to go to the first slide. Of course, it is the mayor and the board of trustees that ultimately determines the budget and has the annual fiduciary duty of doing so. And we have with us tonight, Mayor Rita Levin, Deputy Mayor Manuel Casada, Trustee Robert Fritchie, Trustee Omar Lopez, and Trustee Dana White. Next slide, please. The Village of Ossining, I apologize, this is a little bit of an eye chart here, but the Village of Ossining comprises many different functions and departments. So the Board of Trustees are ultimately overseeing village management, the fire department, corporation council, and the police department, and the corresponding departments and functions that fall under those headings. Next slide, please. So a little bit of background information on property tax distribution. This is generally the rollout of the proportion of funds that each of us pays in, each of us who live in the village pays in taxes every year. So it changes slightly, but generally speaking, this is the breakdown. County and town tax account for 12% this year. And this is based on the average assessed home value of $397,000, $397,967. So again, if you're above or below, it might be slightly different, but basically you're paying 12% of your taxes are going to county and town, 64% is going to the school district, and 24% is going to the Village of Ossining. And that's really the front line here. the services that the village provides have a direct impact on everybody in the community in terms of their quality of life, in terms of their experience here in the village. So while it's not the largest percentage, certainly it is the very important, a very important percentage, and we really are very cognizant here of that. Our staff understands that and does a really good job of making sure that we are optimizing those services and doing the best we can for our community. Next slide, please. So this provides a snapshot of the village adopted budget as well as the operating funds that comprise that budget. So for 2023, we are looking for the general fund, which is paid largely out of property taxes, as well as other revenues. We're expecting to see $41.5 million in appropriations. And that is going to be made up of revenues. So that includes fees for different services, intermunicipal agreements, things like that, as well as an appropriation of $650,000 from fund balance. This is typical practice for the village because we want to make sure we stay beneath the tax cap and that we try to keep the tax rate as low as we can. And then the majority of funding going into that appropriation is from property taxes, and we estimate that to be about $24.6 million this year.
Just have a question.
Sure.
On the top, Village of Austin fiscal year tentative, 23, but underneath summary of adopted budget, so it's good.
We just noticed that.
That
It
was
should
me.
say tentative.
Oh,
not
it should be
adopted.
tentative, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay.
That's a typo, but again, when we're working very diligently, sometimes these
No,
things
sorry.
happen,
I just
so.
wanna make sure that-
But we got the seal right, we did,
Alright.
so, okay. You know, I think it's important to note in the general fund appropriations, and this is something we flagged last year as well, that over $400,000 is allocated to police reform. And this is really an important footnote here. It's not that we're incrementally increasing the budget. This is really money that has been spent in the police department and appropriated for this year, time after time, every year, that has really, under Chief Sylvester's leadership, the village has always placed a lot of importance on making sure that we are working as progressively as possible in our police department. So even before the governor's initiative on police reform policies, the former governor, the village has always been sensitive to this and allocating a part of its police department budget on this. This year, the appropriations that constitute police reform within the police department budget is $417,979. So I just want to note that the other funds that comprise the village tentative budget is our sewer and water fund, and we have held steady at a 5% increase on those funds. Those funds are self-funded through the water rate payers in the district. The Section 8 program, which is a federally funded project. And then our debt service fund is really more of a bookkeeping accounting feature that reconciles our debt service to our bonds advance. And so that really gives you a snapshot. So the net total that we are looking at to run the village of Ossining is $58,629,599. And again, a demonstration of where we're getting our revenues on that, as well as how that breaks down across those funds. So this really provides a very comprehensive view of the entire tentative budget for the village of Ossining. Any questions?
No, I mean,
I was just asking Dale earlier, I'm just surprised that it's actually about the same. I looked up. Or is it about 2 million more from last year? Last year was 56, that's what you were showing me.
Yeah.
So last year was 56. It's still,
Mhm.
given 30%
Right.
increases in
Yeah.
all the costs. Nice. I mean, it's a big picture.
Right.
Yeah, and essentially, we do try to, we'll talk about this more as we go through the presentation, to hold things flat. We do have some increases due to contractual agreements and other things that we have to adjust for, as well as the assessment role. But ultimately, we work very hard to make sure that we are keeping the budget as consistent as possible year to year. So if we go to the next slide, please. So this gives us a bit of an indication of how our budget compares to last year's for the general fund and what that impact is in terms of our tax rate. So our total appropriations for 2022 were $39.5 million. And now we're at $41.5 million, which does constitute a 4.85% increase. Our total raised by taxes last year was $23.7 million. This year will be $24.6 million. And what we're seeing is a 3.71% increase. And this has to do with the change in the assessed value. So we did see a significant increase in the assessed value, which is one of the partly influenced by or maybe significantly impacted by the COVID pandemic. But we went from an average assessed value for the average home in Ossining in 2022 was assessed at $351,164, and the average assessed home in Austin is now at $397,967. So that accounts for a 13.33% increase in assessed value, which does have an immediate impact on our tax rate, which has been lowered by 95 cents per $1,000 of assessed value, and that's a 9.6% decrease from last year to this year in terms of tax rate. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about the tax cap. New York State tax cap legislation stresses that a municipality is entitled to raise the levy by 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. And I think it's no surprise this year that the rate of inflation far exceeds the tax cap. So the tax cap is calculated, the 2% tax cap is calculated against the amount levied last year. And then we have some allowances that actually allow us to increase the tax cap. So it gets a little bit confusing, but because we did not levy the full amount, the full 2% last year, we have a carryover from 2022 of $145,447, a growth factor that's provided to us of $9,502, and a pilot net difference. And pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes. And in this case, the $255,232 is recognized for the residential portion of the Harbor Square project, which the pilot on that portion of the project, not the restaurant, but that expired. That expires, and that now will go onto the tax rolls, but that pilot amount is reflected there. Or the net difference of the pilot, rather. So that gives us a total 2023 tax cap additional amount of $891,462, which is a 3.7533% total tax cap increase. We just don't want to leave any numbers off the decimal points there. And so that gives us a total levy of $24,647,757. So that is the amount that we can levy, the full amount this year. We're gonna, the tentative budget is actually slightly less than that. It's about $10,000 less than that. But that is what we're putting forth this year. Next slide, please.
Sorry, Karen. So at that point, what you're saying is that we're gonna be increasing the tax cap pretty much?
No, that is actually, so this is, the tax cap is the 2%. But in that formula, it allows for incremental increases. So this is something we do every year. We do not go over the tax cap. The tax cap is 2%. But the reality is the tax cap usually allows you more leverage, so it's actually higher. Because their allowance is built into that. The growth factor is a factor that's we get from the state. And the other factors are factors that we have because last year we didn't levy the full amount, so we're allowed, so if we're under the tax cap 1 year, we're allowed to carry that difference forward to the next year. So that's all allowable. It keeps us in compliance with New York State tax cap legislation.
You can carry 1 year or you can carry.
You can carry 1 year and you can carry 1.5% of the prior year levy. That's all you can carry.
And that's what we have done in the past as well. It's only 1 year that we actually went over the tax cap, many years ago.
Many.
Many years ago, yes.
Yes.
What goes into the,
What goes into the assessed value of the homes in addition to single family homes?
The assessed value, okay, so that's an important point, because in this, we're basing this on the average cost of a single, the average single family home. However, actually, it's our overall assessment increase does include commercial. So instead of 13.33%, which is just based on the average homeowner, if you include commercial properties in that, it's actually 14.05% increase, correct?
Yes.
So commercial, just so the public is clear, I think people hear commercial, I think businesses, but you actually also mean condos. Because condos are actually
Commercial would mean condos, it would mean apartment buildings, it would mean businesses, corporations. So yes, and that wasn't reflected in what we're doing here, just to keep things apples to
No,
apples.
I think you're just doing an overview here, so I just want to make sure people understand.
Yeah, so actually, that is a significant thing to understand, that the actual assessed value is a little bit higher, it's higher than 13.33%, include commercial. Okay, so if you want to take a little bit of look of where that money goes, the money goes across several different pools. So we have employee benefits, which take up a huge chunk, as well as public safety, which includes the fire department, the police department, and the building department. Our other funds are coming, or our other expenditures rather, are going to recreational parks, home and community services, which include planning and zoning services, transportation, as well as general government support, which is administrative support, and then of course debt service. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna go through the revenue side of the general fund. And again, the majority of the funds in the general fund come from property taxes. We also have non-property tax revenue, which would be pilots. We have the other larger item is intergovernmental charges, which is IMAs or intermunicipal agreements, departmental income, which is fees associated with programs. And then we have a variety of other smaller revenue items that we will go over in great detail when we go over the budget line by line, but this just gives you an idea of how our revenues are the breakdown of our revenues, as well as the some historical background on the revenues, where we've been in from 2020 to our tentative budget now.
Can I ask you a question on that slide? From 2020 to 2022, I guess the federal state aid has been reduced. Do you happen to know why is that?
The federal state aid is,
If I could just chime in.
yeah,
Timing, so.
So to put closer in.
So the federal state aid, we're budgeting for actual items.
Can't
that
hear her?
Coming.
Dale, move it literally right by your mouth. Can't
We
hear.
can't hear her either out here.
Can you go, can you hear me
Yeah.
now?
You have to speak loudly. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. So federal state aid, we're budgeting for only what is defined every year. So basically that's mortgage tax. A couple of state grants that are every year. But over and above that, if we receive funds, that's where you're seeing the upper level. And it's usually FEMA has played a role in coming in. And so we're seeing that again this year. You can't see 2022 on these schedules, but when we do our budget meetings, you'll be able to see it
Right.
on the detail reports.
And there's typically a lag in the FEMA funding too.
Yes.
So that also influences on the more recent years as well. Next slide, please. The next four charts really detail breakdowns of spending and revenue by fund. Our water and sewer fund are self-funded, and our Section 8 program is funded by is a federally funded program rather, I'm sorry. And then the general fund, again, the breakdown of employee benefits, personnel services, contractual, which is our operational costs, heating, electric. So these are a bit repetitive and they give a lot of detail. And we like to put these charts in here because this will go public, and this way it gives the public an opportunity to read it. But in the interest of time and in the knowledge that over next week, we'll be spending hours and hours pouring over this. Unless there are any questions, I can just skip through the next 4 slides and get to the project status update and projects for 2023. So any questions or skip away? All right.
Some questions, but I'll wait for next week, I guess.
All right.
Well,
Jane,
we do this is normal, like we get the general gist and then, yeah.
whatever the board wants. Jamie,
I
If you
just
could
want to say,
go-
I can barely hear, trustee Casada. Sorry.
okay. Jamie, can you just,
That was
Don't,
just a
don't worry
sarcastic
about
joke.
it. Don't worry about it, Jamie. It's okay.
Jamie,
No
can
worries.
you just flip forward to the 2022 project status update slide? Great.
There you go.
thank you. So this is really a brief update that of a larger update that I gave you last week. So again, it talks about the major projects during 2022 that we've initiated and in certain cases have completed. And some of them are projects that are being initiated now that will carry in and have impact on the 2023 budget. So as we spoke about last week, the Village Steel nearly complete in doing that transformation. The big note for 22 and 23 is the Downtown Revitalization Initiative, the $10 million we were awarded by the state at the end of 2021. So that is having an impact on the projects that we're bringing forth, and some of the ones that a lot of the ones that we're talking about. We've launched the firehouse consolidation study. We have are moving forward with renovating the elevator at 16 Croton, implementing our traffic and parking mobility studies, and getting Five Corners redesign started as well at the corners, at the intersection of Spring and Main Streets. So we had gone over this in detail last week. All of this information is also on the website, but happy to answer any questions on 2022 projects.
Well, it's 2022 going into multi-year,
Correct.
but I would have thought the solar panels for the parking lot that would
Yes.
be up there.
So
Because
we
that's
do-
a pretty big, plus the operations center, but for actual public use.
So we do have it. So we have, because we're spanning different things, we put things in different categories. We're overlapping a little bit, but I will be talking about that. So the good news is we are starting solar panels, and this is the important thing. We did talk about it last week in at the op center. That roof will go in, and that should be completed. Actually, that should be on this list. On 2023, though, we will be putting a solar canopy at the train station.
Right.
So that is a project that's.
Oh,
sort
so you're
of a-
gonna do that for 20.
Yeah, so again, we've got a lot going on and most of it doesn't work within a calendar year. So I apologize for that confusion, but the good news is we're well on our way to solarizing Austin.
So I guess this is not budget, sort of like it's budget related, but, and I watched the meeting last week as well. I guess my curiosity is in some of the projects that you have in there, one of them strikes my attention, obviously, is the access to the building department planning access in the city. I would like to get a little more information on the status. I know you have that as an April starting date to be live, I
So
guess.
I can have Maddie talk to you about that.
So
because
but
we
I guess
have
this,
some
I
good
just
news on
want, yeah,
municipal.
I just, this is a budget presentation. I just don't want to take that away from that presentation, but I'd be curious to see, there's all the projects in that list that I would like to get more details to it. So,
I can make this as quick as can be. Good evening. We are hoping to launch the final phase, which is Municipal Connect in late December, early January. So
Maddie, you're coming in garbled. I'm sorry.
Jamie?
Oh,
That is so much better.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good evening, Board. I can make this very quick. Municity 5, the last component, which is the public access and Municipal Connect, should be launching last week in December, first week in January
This year,
this year. Next couple of weeks.
next month.
is that gonna be 100%? Because we've been working at it for over 2 years.
I believe so. Without going into exhaustive detail, we had our closeout meeting this week. The treasurer's office and I have been working together on the payment module. All the pieces are coming together. There's a couple glitches here and there. There are 2 things that we know for sure we have to fix before we go live, but we've been assured by the software developers that they won't be an issue and we're ready to go.
I'm gonna hold you accountable.
That's fine.
She's not scared. I think what we should do is just, yeah, why don't we, yeah, there's one right here.
Yeah, we have to.
Or what, yeah, why don't we just like do a whiteboard so we're not stuck? Like, there are a lot of projects, and there are a couple I would have put up there before some of the others, but.
We
it
have,
doesn't
we
matter.
have
I'm sure you have more.
actually, let us go forward.
No, I
So-
understand, but let's whiteboard some of this so that we're just
Yeah, we're
saying, hey,
taking, we're
as we
taking
go
notes.
into details and then. that'll be
For
all.
sure. In fact, on the next slide, we have 2022 additional project summary. So some of these things we're talking about, so,
So you broke it down.
and actually, we do have the things that we broke down as initiatives and projects. So we are continuing our 3-year cycle of professional service, requests for proposals. We've expanded parking options at the train station and downtown via the Passport app. We have secured for our parks and recreation, we've secured a $500,000 grant for the community center pool locker room renovations through Sam Grant from Sandy Gallup, Assemblywoman Sandy Gallup, and $150,000 for a Veterans Park inclusive playground replacement. That's an inclusive playground, so it allows children of different needs and developmental needs and physical needs participate in playing in the playground, and we have also completed the COVID memorial at Nelson Spin Park. In terms of sustainability, and this is where we're talking more specifically about the solar initiatives, we were named a tree city, that was in 2021, and we are continuing our a committed path to ensure that we are planting trees that are native to our community and that we are improving our ability to maintain and care for those trees, including trimming of those trees. We've secured plug-in and hybrid vehicles, so we're greening our fleet in the building department, and we have gotten some money from clean energy community funding for that. We have an agreement with Ecogy for a solar array, and this is the one at the operations center, and that's in the works, as well as a pending agreement with DSD Solar Canopy for we're working on lease agreement for solar canopy at the Austin train station. We completed engagement around the Austin shoreline and revitalization project, and there's a meeting actually tomorrow night to talk about the improvements and planning around the waterfront. And that's a joint project with the town to ensure that our waterfront, we're building for resiliency in the light of climate change and sea level rise. So a lot of exciting things going on in terms of planning for those efforts. And we did secure $50,000 through New York State Department of Environmental Conservation for the Austin Riverfront Resilience Plan. Say that 3 times fast. We are in the final stages of New York State Clean Transportation Prize for Project Mover with Nelson Nygaard, and that would give us a $7 million boost to our e-bike infrastructure here in Ossing, along with other towns throughout the area. So we are keeping our fingers crossed for that funding. Next slide, please. So 2023 major projects, and I can't see that, so I'm going to read off my list here. We have a lot going on, so we need to make more slides or bigger type, I don't know, but this will all be on the website where it'll be very much more clearly legible to everybody. For administration, we're focusing on optimizing our website, and working to coordinate information of village services, police department, and recreation. And we're also looking to bring back an idea that we had pre-COVID to doing a local government academy where we're doing more outreach and education on government functions. And we really want to kick that off with some outreach and education around our building department and taking people through what it means, what you need to do to get a building permit, some of our codes so that we can be more proactive in educating people about what's required and hopefully easing the process for them too. And we plan to do this in a variety of ways, but make sure that we have things video recorded so that we can push them out. And we also plan to be working with Neighbors Link so that we can do more things in Spanish language to facilitate people who have moved here working and improving their homes and maybe are struggling because English is not their native language and there's some new processes.
I'm actually glad to hear that because I did that several years ago. But even though you mentioned Neighbors Link, there's other Spanish entities around the village that I think will be helpful to engage them as well.
Absolutely. So we are always in close conversation with our friends at St. Anne's and Ana Guzman at Padres Hispanos. So whatever we can do to make sure that we get the word out. A lot of these processes just are not intuitive if you're a homeowner, and it can trip you up later on when you maybe realize that you haven't filed for a building permit when you need to. We want to avoid punishing people and really promote encouraging people to understand what our process is, why we have those processes in place, and making sure it's easy for people to comply to those processes. So it'll be exciting to work on that and other initiatives too as the year goes on. Planning and economic development, well, parking and mobility fall under that. So we are implementing some of the recommendations from the Nelson Nygaard study, and that includes our Route 9 road diet planning as well in terms of facilitating parking and mobility improvements, as well as improvements that will benefit local business and spark economic development and fuel it. The building and planning department, we are continuing to work on streamlining those processes and strengthening code enforcement. We have some announcements about that later on this evening. But certainly Municity is a big part of that. So that is included in that project initiative. Implementation of DRI funding at Market Square and at 200 Main Street, which is redesigning Market Square to make a really fabulous gathering space in the middle of our village, further rehabbing 200 Main Street to make it more attractive for private sale, and also as looking at Station Plaza and streetscaping. It were all projects that scored highly with the community on the DRI assessment, and we're hoping to get the designation of fundings from the state shortly. We are also part of that too would be preparing a request for a proposal to work with, once we know the designation of funding through the DRI, for a multimodal transportation hub that will offset the loss of surface parking when we do our other developments. Community development includes implementation of BRI funding and SAM grant funding for our community center renovations, strategic planning for parks, and utilization, parks utilization program offerings through our rec department, a new accessible playground at Nelson City Park, in addition to the one that we were looking at Betts Park. And as you know, we have launched our youth bureau, and we'll be looking to establish it, more firmly establish it, expand it, and make sure that we get programming that fits the needs of our community. We are in the process of conducting a needs assessment for the youth bureau. With regard to capital improvements for municipal buildings, we're looking at the generator here, renovations for safety and security and residents' convenience, the elevator, and working to make sure that we can accommodate the BOT office as effectively as possible. So just improvements there that we've talked about before. I guess this is a little redundant, so we're talking about the community center pool repairs again, but again, security enhancements too as we do these things. And the operations center is actually, this is not, we are doing minor things right now at the operations centers. So we are looking to just use the space we have, incorporating receptionist function. No major plans are on for that building for 2023 at this point. However, it's something we can discuss during the budget meetings. And capital transportation, we're doing paving, right-of-way improvements. Paul is got a lot of things going on as well, improvements on Westerly Road, and using DOT funding and Spring Street sidewalks through community development block grant funding. Next slide, please. So with that, I would like to thank you all. If there's any questions, happy to take them.
Well, first of all, this is great. Every year, easier to understand. We're getting it down like visually really helpful. My head, I mean, I know all these projects, we all do, but like seeing them all up there and you speaking 110 miles an hour just moves it along.
I'm sorry if I was speaking too
No,
fast.
no, no,
It's not that
actually-
we have a big agenda tonight.
No, I think it's great. There are a lot of projects. We used to get excited over a $50,000 grant and talk about it for half an hour. So there's just a lot of big stuff. Some of it is bigger than others. Some of these projects are smallish. Some of them are 3 years, multi-million, that involves many pieces. If I could just whiteboard a couple of things. I don't actually know where it fits, but the budgets isn't just about dollars and cents. It's also about sort of prioritizing initiatives for the upcoming year. And thank you, Dale, for doing a 3-year, like we used to only get 1 year at a time, and now thank you for doing the 3-year, so we could prepare year to year, etc. So I'm just curious where you might put things like, which I know we're doing, which is looking at our code and our code book, who knows how many pages, I'm sure Stuart does. You know, and having our attorneys actually start working through and teasing page by page, paragraph by paragraph, so that humans in the community can understand it all. Now, I'm not saying that Ossining is worse than other communities. I've had to deal with building departments and legal and stuff in other communities from a professional point of view. We're nowhere near the bottom of that list. We're not at the top, we're in the middle. We're like many, many municipalities, including big cities, that have a lot of development going on. So not a complaint. I know we budgeted, I know we're gonna look at that. So it needs to somehow, at least people should know that we appreciate that over X number of decades, you know, it became a little convoluted, and maybe we can make it easier for people to understand. I love the academy thing. I actually forgot about that. We talked about that before COVID and doing that. So that should be a great education piece for the community, you know. So I think that's going to be very helpful for people. The question I have, which is more of a macro question, and we haven't discussed it, but sort of comes to mind when I see everything laid out, is if there's any thought, again, this is a whiteboard. I don't need a big discussion, but it does bring to mind that we're doing all these great things. A lot of it is downtown. You know, there's not a lot happening on route like 133 going up. I get that. A lot of the funding is not our funding. The funding comes from government agencies who want downtown revitalization. The definition of it is downtown, and we're historic, you know. We pick from the fruit tree, the fruit that we can pick. We can't get things that aren't there. But just some thought, maybe on that level, well, again, on a macro. The other piece is how we might bring businesses, large and small, into the community. Now that we're building things, now that we're doing things, you know, I don't think I could just go on my LinkedIn account and say, hey, businesses, come on over to us, and lots is going on. But it might be something now, this year, to finally really think through, not leave it to our small business entrepreneurs who will run around saying, hey, let me ask my friend to open the place and who knows where. But actually think through as we're building our community with so many amazing initiatives on how we might look at that. And I know it's not necessarily a budget thing, but it's just something to think about.
Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of the things that you just brought up, so working on our code updates is something that is incorporated, that we're working on, that the board's aware of, and we have funding dedicated to that now, and it will be a process, and we may have to go back to it and look at, depending on how far we want to take it. It's a pretty time-consuming process, and there's a lot to go through. And that certainly falls under the heading of improving our building and planning department functions and streamlining it. The downtown is definitely, that's driven by many different factors. It's driven by waterfront revitalization initiatives. It's driven by government revitalization programs. It's also to a certain extent driven by access to, you know, funding for community village-owned properties. So that's a large reason. It doesn't mean, however, and I think it's important to note that when you improve one part of an ecosystem, it benefits the whole ecosystem. And if you look at Ossining in its entirety, we do want to look at ways to make sure that anything we do to improve downtown reverberates throughout the rest of the community. And one of the key things that we're looking at, the Route 9 Road Diet, which would greatly bridge the physical divide that we have between our Croton Avenue businesses and Uptown Business District and Main Street, making that more walkable, putting parking there does help facilitate and benefit the development of businesses and things of Croton Avenue. I think that you're absolutely right about how we can look at business development. You know, this is something that we look at. It does require a certain amount of capacity, and we have to look at the different options in the short term and maybe in the longer term. So we've talked about doing a business improvement district or something to that end. In the short term, we might want to look at other ways that we can create information for people. Part of it would be making sure that the how to start a business in Ossining can be something that we can do you know, some education on from our building department, planning department. We can also look at ways that we can facilitate our businesses to galvanize with the chamber and other efforts too. These are challenges for a small community, and Ossining is a village. Yet in so many ways, Ossining is really like a small city. So balancing our current capacity and evolving to make sure that we have a more robust capacity, particularly in the area of economic development, is incredibly important. I think that a lot of the things that we're laying and putting in place now lay the foundation for it. So we're excited to hear that from you, Mayor, because I think it's an area we'd love to be able to augment even further.
Thank you. So turning it over, I'm sure there are other questions, comments. It's just something that I wanted out there. So folks, this is our first brush of seeing the numbers, questions, comments, thoughts. And again, thank you for all the hard work that everybody's put into it.
I'll go next. Thank you for the presentation. Thorough as always, a team effort as always. Some odds and ends that came up for me. One is in terms of accessible language. So if you can, I think it's Jamie that's controlling the, go all the way to maybe like the second slide that showed
Let
the,
me know when I get there. Is it
yeah,
This one?
yeah, no,
This one.
no, the next one.
this one?
No, forward,
Oh, I'm sorry.
forward.
Oh, my goodness gracious,
That's the
sorry.
one.
Tell me
Forward,
when.
Snapshot of the
forward.
budget?
Yeah, that's the one. Okay.
That's the one.
Thank
Okay.
you. My sense is that 100% of people won't necessarily know what the word appropriations means in this context. So can you define what appropriations means?
What it, appropriation, so that's the money that we're designating. So it's what we, if you look at it in terms of your home budget, it's the money that you're planning on spending on certain things. So when you're doing your budget, you're maybe committing to spending $200 a month on groceries, probably way more than that, but maybe you're a very small family. You know, you know that you have to buy a new car and you're committing X thousand dollars to purchase that car. And when you're looking at what your funds are and what the things you need to run your household, those different items that you're committing your funding to, that you're thinking about, those are appropriations. So in government speak, that means that we are looking to make sure that we have the money we need to operate the village as a whole. And that means that we have the money to cover everybody's salary, and we have the money to keep lights on, and we have the money to pay benefits. And so, you know, for the water fund, we want to make sure we have the money that allows us to hire the technical staff we need to run a plant that provides us with clean water. So those really appropriation just means that's the money we have planned and dedicated based on what we know we need through years of experience to run the village.
Yep. Super helpful. And how much of that is money that we definitely have to spend versus money that we're planning to hopefully spend, but we'll see, we'll put it in the budget and we'll see what happens.
The lion's share of the money in appropriations is money that's essential to spend to provide the services that we need to provide. Not just because they're good service to provide people, because we're required to by law in some instances, because it's what we need to provide basic health and human services to our community. So the bulk of it is money, and some of it is contractual based on union contracts that we're committed to, as well as healthcare expenses, things like that are somewhat fixed costs.
Thank you. Next, Jamie, can you go forward? Forward, forward, forward. Past all these graphs. No, actually, I want the graphs. I want the graphs. Go back, stop. To like one of the first graphs. I want to look at the graph right after this, the one that has benefits.
Next one.
the
Next one?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, employee benefits. I noticed that it went up by $1 million, basically 2020, 21, 22, 23, $1 million more every year. Is that about the rate that one should expect? It's another $1 million every year, and is that indefinite? And then will 100% of the budget be benefits?
No, because the other portions of the budget will unfortunately grow as well. So it will keep growing in somewhat proportion. Employee benefits do include healthcare costs, which tend to rise significantly each year. It also includes retirement benefits, any number of things that based on cost of living, based on different factors, do tend to increase. I will turn this over to Dale to speak more specifically to give a better understanding in a general way, in the user-friendly way that we're not often good at doing here, about what drives employee benefits.
Thank you, Manager. I'm sorry. So you're correct. Employee benefits is basically our retirement. So it's employee retirement system and police and fire retirement system. those costs.
Dale, I'm sorry, can you speak up? I apologize.
Those costs are dependent on the rates established by the state for the pension fund, so they went down a little bit, now they're creeping back up for this current year budget, slightly, not, enormously, but our liability for it is also dependent on the tier that an employee is in, so that can change too. So as we have more people retiring and you have a newer, younger generation coming on, they're in a different tier, which is a lower cost as well. So that comes into play. Workers' comp is dependent on, we are self-insured. It is dependent on experience level, as well as we try to cover our liability already, which we do. We have a separate workers' comp fund as well as a general liability fund that houses our long-term amounts that we need. Health insurance, we're also currently self-insured. So that's another one that can be greatly varied along the way, depending on experience and what's happening with our current workforce and our retirees, that we cover. Employee benefits also include Social Security, FICA, Medicare is included in there, dental, life insurance. So all of these items come into play and create that number.
Thank you. And then last for me, I don't know if it's on, I'm sure it's on a slide, but I just don't know it. And I'll spare us the exercise of going through it, is, and this may not be a question, maybe more of a comment, but building on observation that you made, Mayor, is the budget is going up by like $2 million or something like that compared to last year. And when you look at what's been going on over the course of the last year, 2 years, one of the things that I found remarkable, this was something like a 15-ish minute presentation. And I don't know if you said the word COVID once. And for us to be at a point where we can say, like, here's what we'll have to look forward to last year, reflecting on the year that was, and for that to not have come up at all is just something remarkable and something to note. But also part of now what we're experiencing is inflation. There's all these different things. I am curious, to what extent do these kind of larger issues that affect the economy affect the way that we choose to structure our budget?
I think that's an excellent question. So a lot of what we do is focused on understanding financial trends. Certainly this year's budget, you are going to see an allocation of greater resources put to overhead costs, fuel, because we know what's coming down the pike. Dale does a really good job of staying informed from a government perspective. So not only are we looking at operation costs, but we're looking at debt service interest rates, how we are going to plan to ban or bond to make sure that we can get the most competitive interest rates. And I think it's important to give her the benefit of talking about this, because this is not just guesswork and adding 20%. It's an enormous amount of effort that is put into analyzing every aspect of what we do to make sure that we're budgeting conservatively, to make sure that we're not going to run into problems. And Dale really is, our treasurer is a master at managing revenue to expenses. She did a superb job during COVID when a lot of municipalities were caught off guard. We have a healthy fund balance that allows us to spend our fund balance, appropriate our fund balance every year to offset an impact on taxpayers. And it's because of the thorough work she does, really analyzing all throughout the year what the impact is, making sure that she's in close conversation with the state and other entities that will give us that information we need to plan conservatively and really very responsibly. So I don't know if you want to comment on what goes into you doing your stuff. You're certainly not pulling numbers out of thin air.
Thank you. very much. That was very nice. There's a lot that goes into it. And as we go into our budget meetings next week, we will definitely touch on everything, especially as the village manager said, we've had to recognize that in terms of material supplies, those costs have jumped. We know it, and they're potentially probably going to jump more in 2023. So as we're going through the budget during the process, and each department is also recognized, and they also do a fabulous job of keeping on top of where things are heading, what changes are coming, as well as Stuart with all those chemical changes that have been coming along with the increases. So it's a totally village-wide group project that everybody works towards to make sure that we're covered. But you can definitely see it when you look at like the contractual amount. That's a really big sign where you had 6.8 million for the 2002 original budget, and now you're up to 7.8.
And again, that's operating,
2023.
fuel,
Right.
electric, heat, all of those costs come into the contractual pie slice there.
Right.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Oops, I'm sorry.
Anyone else? We gotta speak into the mics.
I can wait till next week.
Okay.
That's great, Bob, thank you. I do have obviously not too much details, but I guess next week, when we get a little bit more into the IMAs and obviously the water, the 5%, I'll be curious to find out a little bit more in the status on the town level. And how are we gonna balance that portion of that as well? So you don't have to go into the details now, because I know there's other variables that maybe we'll go a little bit more into detail next week, but that's that's what I'm hearing so far. So, but I'll have the weekend to look at the budget. So thank you. Dan.
Okay, great.
I have one more thing, Dale. I can read my own handwriting apparently. So we're like in a new world right now. We have never in this village in its history received this many grants and at these sizes. So it would be interesting to sort of do a parallel path because some, if not all or most, need match funding. They're not all the same, but they do need them. And we do have the funds available, otherwise we wouldn't have gotten them in the first place, because, the state made sure that we had the ability to match funding. But it would be interesting, since we haven't traveled this course before, to sort of get a good sense of the various funds and what the parallel funds are, so that we get a sense of the total picture. That would be helpful. We don't need it tonight. We just, as we go through the details and the budget, that would be just helpful to keep track of that. Thank you.
Those matching funds are incorporated in the budget when we go through the capital plan, especially, so you'll really will have a good picture of what that is going through the budget process. I do just, if there's not any more questions, I'd just like to go to the last slide so that we can show the public the dates of the
Oh, yeah, thank you.
the meetings. All right, there you go. So next week, the board will be very busy, as will staff, working on the budget. So we will be going over a very long budget line by line. On election day, we'll be working all day from 9 to 6 p.m. going through the budget. Wednesday evening from 5 to 10:30 is when we're scheduled, and Friday we'll get everybody out early. We're only doing 5 to 9 on Friday. Hopefully, if we need more time, we do have some time reserved on Saturday, November 12th, and on Wednesday, November 16th. We will be presenting. We will be opening 2023 budget public hearing. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan.
I feel like a pair of brown shoes at a tuxedo convention. There's very little from Corporation Counsel tonight. The zoning board meeting for this month will actually be on Tuesday, November 15th, because next Tuesday is election day. So if any of you wish to participate in that meeting, watch it. This is also for the public. That meeting obviously will be available via Zoom. The planning board meeting is the following Tuesday, which will be November 22nd. Those agendas are not yet online. They will be within the next few days if any of you are interested. There's also a Historic Preservation Commission meeting this Monday night, and there is one application that I know that is on that night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Police Chief Kevin Sylvester.
Good evening. Am I good on this one? Jamie, am I good?
I think you might need to give him that one.
Yeah,
There
trying
seems
to-
to
You
be-
are.
No, she said
Oh,
she's
she
got me,
is?
so
Okay, good.
I got a little bit of volume tonight. So a few things from the police department tonight. So, lockdown drills for the year are well underway. We're nearing our first half completion of those. Got a number that are required by the state, so work closely with the school. We're working our way through those. Had several of them this week. Also in our schools, one of the items on our police reform plan was to have a recruitment initiative in the schools. This week we had an opportunity for Officer Urban and Tompkins, as well as Detectives Chavez and Hadjistoyanos to attend Career Day and spend the day with students at Austin High School, talking to them about careers in law enforcement, which is super important for our local recruiting plan. This past weekend, we participated in the DEA's National Drug Take Back Day. And a reminder that the Drug Take Back Bin is available 24/7, 365 in the lobby of the world famous Birdsall Fagan Police Support Facility. Last week, Officer Emily Costa attended the New York Women in Law Enforcement Annual Training Conference in Freeport, New York. Next year, it will be held in Tarrytown, so we're excited and looking for all of our female employees to be there. As was mentioned earlier, we had our annual trunk or treat event. Nice to have that back after a while. In terms of staffing, last week we said goodbye to Sergeant Joe Tolby, who retired after a little more than 20 years, which leads us to hiring. So looking forward, we had some interviews this week. We wrapped those up and we'll be looking forward to discussing with the board our hiring and staffing plan going forward. That's all for tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody here or online who would like to make an organizational announcement? If so, please raise your virtual hand online.
I'm looking to see if anyone has their hands up, but so far no one does.
Okay.
Do I give them another minute?
Let's give them a minute. Let's give it a minute. Sometimes people can figure out the technology. Give it a second here.
It doesn't look like anyone has their hands up.
Okay, is there anybody in the public who would like to address the board in any of the resolutions on tonight's agenda? If so, please stand here in the room or click on the virtual hand on Zoom.
We have two people here. Do either of you,
For visitors.
So far, no one has their hands up.
are you,
Okay.
okay, hold on, Jamie. We have people in
So
here
now-
present. You want to go for what? I'm sorry.
No, if he wants to go for visitors, I'm just asking, can I make a comment on what you just did? Does that fit into this particular?
Yeah, that's part of
Yes,
the agenda.
but we need you near a mic. That's the only
No,
thing.
yeah, I'll get it.
Yeah. How are you?
Okay, thank you very much.
Good. Nice to see you again.
First of all, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Definitely, we were not planning to come here to listen to this entire presentation. Thank you for the overview. It's quite interesting. I'm very impressed with the amount of money you guys are getting. And hopefully, and you're involved with a lot of different projects that, as an outsider, we don't know about, because we don't really know what you guys are doing, but I'm glad to hear and see. What caught my attention was on the, one of the slides that you presented, the one that said police reform. Is there any way that I can find out what that entailed? I mean, if it doesn't have to be tonight, I mean, just specifics. I'm just curious about what,
The 417, I think.
it was $240,000.
So I can let the chief speak to this
Okay.
since he's here, and I do have the schedule. This is really what, but just to caveat, this isn't incremental spending necessarily, but it is what we're doing that would fall under the umbrella of police reform, which is really stuff we've been doing for a long, long time. So I'll let the chief speak to it more specifically.
Sure. So what that is it's an accounting of places that we've been spending money on items that are related to police reform. So in other words, each year we have to make allocations for in-service training. If one of those trainings is something that falls under we generally don't have the opportunity to have a lot of additional hours for training, but each year we change it. One year, the main focus may be a large evolution on active shooter in the schools. And one year we did like a whole 40-hour thing for every person, or a 40-hour evolution to get the whole department through implicit bias training. So what that is it's divvying out which portions of our training are dedicated to items that are dedicated towards police reform. Some of it is new spending in terms of equipment and things like that. So there's some additional training equipment that we're purchasing and things. There's some schools that people may be going to, but in large part, it's simply taking the training budget as it exists. And the reason that it's so high and you don't see drastic changes in the police department budget is it's almost exclusively, not exclusively, but the vast majority of this is staff hours. So we're just, a lot of our training happens on straight time. Some of it does require overtime. But what this is really doing is acknowledging how are we using the time that we're already paying for towards the initiatives of bettering our police.
Okay, very interesting. Then the only thing that I have to tell you, a little disappointed about is the fact that I didn't see any line items in this budget as far as, I don't know what you want to call it, traffic control, or perhaps traffic, what would I call it, relief? Because we have to understand that we all know that the traffic here in Ossipee is really, really bad.
So we do get a lot of conversation. There's a lot of conversations here as well as resident complaints and concerns about traffic. And one of the things that the Route 9 road diet, which has been considering Austin for some years now, there is a traffic calming element of that. So slowing the traffic that's zipping down Route 9 through that stretch where it's four lanes. As far as you wouldn't necessarily see it reflected as a line item per se, but there are a lot of things that we're doing in a combination of working with our village engineer and Chief Sylvester of the police department in looking at different intersections differently. I will say that we were up at on Van Cortlandt with the superintendent of schools and the police department. Lieutenant Donahue was there, Paul Fraley, our village engineer, was there meeting with Ray Sanchez, the school superintendent, because certainly one of the impacts of COVID is people aren't putting their kids on the bus as much, and the number of people driving up Van Cortlandt, which then impacts Havel Street. So we're well aware of this. We're also working on looking at streets and making some changes on on-street parking, and maybe not moving on-street parking in some reasons. We recognize that certain streets are not easily passable, and there are two ways. So it is something that we're looking at. We are working in targeted areas of the village where we know that this is a problem, and we're looking to mitigate those issues and make some changes. And I just want to make sure that the chief is able to comment as well if he has anything he wants to add, but because this is something that we are working very closely with the police department on. Yeah.
No, look, again, when it goes back to dealing with traffic problems from an enforcement perspective, a lot of that is how we take the money that's already allocated and distribute the staff, right? So one of the things we did this year is added officers to the schools. One of the things we're looking at for next year is how we can better manage those officers on patrol to have more enforcement. I can tell you that since Lieutenant Donahue was taken over as the patrol commander, statistically enforcement is up multiple times. So that's one part. I mean, look, there's a couple of challenges to managing traffic in Austin beyond the infrastructure to it. One is that when COVID happened, I've stated many times in many meetings that, there was a point where officers were reluctant to stick their face in the window because there was a safety issue in the very beginning of the pandemic. And we knew that asking people to do less is a really easy thing to do. Getting them to do more, much, much harder. So there was a rebuild phase from that. And look, according to the numbers, we're right where we were pre-pandemic. So in terms of enforcement and the amount of it, we're there. Now it's where we direct it and how we affect those things. The Havel Street thing, we've talked about a number of times. That requires some kind of drastic action, in my opinion. And that's not always easy to do. It's not always immediately available, but it's something that we continue to have conversation about.
We'll talk about Havel Street a little later. And then lastly, but thank you, Chief. Lastly, I also didn't see anything, this might be hidden in some line item also, the road paving
So we do have a budget for road paving, and we are following through on a paving schedule. We have gotten some grant money that will allow us to do some paving. We've identified Westerly Road as an area. We're also working with, we'll be doing paving in conjunction with some funding in the Spring Street, State Street area and along Spring Street with, that will supplement some of the monies that we're getting from the Community Development Block Grant for sidewalk improvements and ADA accessibility. We're also looking at some intersection work at the Dale Avenue intersection on Croton Avenue, which is more streetscaping, but we're definitely making sure that we're addressing paving in as comprehensively as we can. We've also been working with Con Edison, so we had a little bit of a win with them on Dale Avenue because they were able to do, we're really enforcing curb to curb repairs as or replacement as opposed to just patchwork when they're doing work. We know that we have a lot of work being done, infrastructure work being done by Con Ed that's impacting the roads. So we are trying to do as comprehensive a job as possible just with the funding we get through CHIPS and other programs. But we are trying to augment that as well so that we can spread the paving at a greater distance throughout the village.
Yeah, because it really needs it. But anyway, I think that's all I have.
Could you do me a favor? I forgot that, I know who you are. Just for the record,
I'm
the
sorry.
name, and
Yes.
if you tell us where you live.
I'm
is that-
sorry.
No,
My name is
not at all.
Marcia Perillo, and I live at 72 Havel Street
Thank
in
you.
Ossining. Thank you very much.
We have a continuous question from an anonymous person on Zoom, but I won't accept anonymous questions. It also involves a matter of personnel, related to the police department. So I'm not going to entertain people who are residents and our constituents in the village of Ossining would like to ask. They need to state their name. We serve our constituents. So if you want to put your name in and specific question, if it's a matter of personnel, we don't discuss it in a legislative session. Martha, if you could read again what the questions are that people can ask, the way Ms. Furlow did, where we are on the agenda.
Okay, so we just finished up on public comments on agenda items only.
On agenda items. So if it's not on the agenda, it's not up for discussion right now. Go ahead.
So then upcoming, we have our visitor recognition. This is a 3-minute opportunity to address the board on issues not related to the agenda tonight, but are relevant to the common good of the village. And if somebody's in person, you can come in at the moment.
Mr. Perillo, do you want to come up? Thank you. Nice to see you as well.
Thank you. Good evening to all.
Good evening.
I'll be starting the timer now.
My name is John Perillo, 72 Havel Street in Ossining, New York. On June 9th of this year, I sent the board and various other entities a concern of Havel Street. I've been bringing this attention over the past several years. And Havel Street, which I've been involved with, I have business interests since 1967 to presently on Havel Street. I'm very familiar, and I also live on Havel Street for the past 22 years. So Havel Street has a physical problem in the beginning of the street. It doesn't meet the road width requirement, so I think it's 26 feet from curb to curb. So it's a two-way traffic with parking on the right side, legal parking on the right side. And the majority of people, I think, they just don't know that if you have cars parked on your side of the street, you must yield to oncoming traffic. So what happens is people drive around 300 feet on a pedestrian sidewalk. That's parallel to formerly Al's glass yard. And it's a game of chicken, if anybody has ever experienced that. So people that live on Havel Street are courteous. They see somebody coming and they duck someplace, but the majority of people fly off of North Highland Avenue and dash right up to Havel Street. I particularly don't drive on sidewalks for mainly two reasons. It's not legal to drive on sidewalks. And back in the late 50s or early 60s, my older brother, Frank, was driving on Dale Avenue, and it was a similar situation of road work being done. And in order to keep two-way traffic, people had to go on the sidewalk and, keep going. Unfortunately, a young African-American girl, I think she was 9 years old, darted out. He hit her and she died. The most horrible thing is when our family had to go down to the funeral parlor on Lower Main Street to pay our respects. Something needs to be done on Havel Street. So I'm here formally telling the village, putting them on notice that something has to be done. During my tenure as mayor, we started a project. I think it was Officer Pete Carpenter had stripped the road for counting cars and stuff like that, but nothing really ever happened. I had suggested some ideas, and in this, what I sent to the board, you take it or leave it or use some of it or hire professional people to monitor it. I personally think from Havel Street to the first driveway of Sabrina Lane has to be one way. And also, while we're in that area, you have a double yellow line that forces you to drive from that point all the way up Havel Street if there's cars parked outside of on the wrong side of the road. So if anybody has the time when they leave here, it's an opportunity to drive up Havel Street. You're actually driving over the double yellow line on the wrong side of the road. Some people may think, well, what's the big deal? But it's the old saying, if you're pregnant, you're pregnant. You don't get a little pregnant. I mean, it's got to be remedied. So I respectfully ask the village to make it a priority. On October 26th, as I was coming down Havel Street, I had a situation. I was coming down and somebody was coming off North Highland Avenue, and he wouldn't move. I mean, I was on the right side of the road. He wanted me to drive on the sidewalk. I wouldn't do that. Officers, I called, and they came. The officer told the person to just back up the car so I can go. He refused. He asked me to drive on the sidewalk to allow that car.
Time?
Oh, time?
I asked, is that time?
Yeah.
It is.
I asked him, is he, giving me the okay? He said yes, and I did drive on the sidewalk to move the car.
You said your email was June 9th?
I'm sorry?
Did you say the email you sent?
No, I sent a physical letter.
Okay, I was
Okay.
looking at my
I'm gonna
email.
leave
so
it
probably-
with the.
Just leave it here.
Yeah, I don't know who do I
Put it
give
right
this to?
there.
We can take it. Mr. Perillo, certainly, you and I have spoken about, and as Chief Sylvester said, we are very aware of the issue on Havel Street. I've encountered it myself, and if somebody didn't drive on the sidewalk, I probably would still be on Havel Street.
That's right.
We both would.
I just want to
So-
also say to the board that village-owned vehicles drive on the sidewalk. I mean, I'm not trying to point fingers, but it's common. And I'm not talking about creeping down the road. I'm talking about normal traffic, and there are a lot of children on that street. And the houses, you come out of your front door, you're stepping on the curb. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I
There's
do
just-
want to acknowledge that this is something that we are looking into, and I wish we had a very simple magic wand fix that would be easy. We do recognize it's a problem. And as the chief mentioned, it will involve a little bit of work to address all the implications. But we are, it is an important change that needs to be addressed. So I
I'm
don't.
also here because a lot of people have contacted me. They actually want to come in mass. And I said, let me go and talk to the
No, we
board.
appreciate that.
Okay, and hopefully, you have my phone numbers, just
Right.
contact me, and if I can be of any assistance, I just want to get it done. It's a public street.
We will
Thank you very
definitely keep you in the
much.
loop, in conjunction with our conversations with the superintendent and addressing traffic issues in that area. This is something that also came up. So we are, I know it can be frustrating when things take a longer time than you would like them to, and it impacts you every day. But we do have a real sensitivity to this, and I do agree, it's an area, and it was, when we were talking about areas and intersections that we're looking at, this happens to be one of those areas that we need to make sure that we can
Well, I appreciate it,
manage
Karen.
traffic safely, so.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate it.
With that, we're gonna leave.
No,
Oh, you wanna go?
Can I go back up?
Is it about,
It's
So-
about Havel Street.
no, I don't know, it's like, it's a husband, so it's weird, it's supposed to be one person. But it's on the
I can
agenda.
make it on
Okay.
a.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
This is a visitor recognition.
That's
Go ahead.
correct.
Martha, you need to keep the time, please.
Good evening again. I won't be long. Marcia Carrillo, 72 Havel Street, just kind of to continue with John. The issue here, as far as I'm concerned, is that it's not just Havel Street. I mean, Havel Street is a major issue. But we're talking John Street, we're talking Yale, we're talking Aqueduct, we're talking the entire community. And I just fear that if nothing gets done, it's like a cancer. It will just spread so much that it's gonna be so overwhelming by the time we get there that we're not gonna be able to handle it or do it correctly anyway. So people, that's all they talk about. The issue with that John encountered or experienced a couple of days ago, I was not there. Okay, but I know what happened. What was very concerning to me was that the police officer actually, it was almost like he was intimidated by this guy who was just refused to leave. He was cursing at the police officer, like, right? And he actually just, instead of pushing him to do the right thing, or you get a ticket, or I bring more people over, or whatever, he just said to the guy that was doing the right thing, you move. Okay, I mean, that to me was very concerning because it was almost like an intimidation thing coming from the community. And you know what? If he does it, so will everybody else. And that's very concerning because to me, that's setting precedents. It will become the new normal now. Just drive on the sidewalk. It's not, how many people say that to us? Just drive on the sidewalk. You can drive on the sidewalk. And we're like, no. And one of these days, I just fear that there's going to be a fatality because these people are like angry. This guy was so angry. And I mean, the police officer was intimidated by him. Okay, what about the rest of the community? And like I said, this is just one street. It's everywhere. So like John, I really, really urge you to look into and try to be a little, see what you can do about this because everywhere you go, this is, I mean, we don't leave the house from like what, 3:30 to 7 because there's nowhere to go. It's just all over the place. And in the morning, I don't leave until, I try not to leave until 9. So, I mean, that's me. I can do that. Other people don't have that luxury. But it's just a bad situation. And I think that it merits bringing it up before the board. And I'm hoping that people that are watching this, they're probably sitting home just shaking their head, yes. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Manuel, thank you for acknowledging the Cuenca thing. Although I'm not from Cuenca, never been, but thank you. It is my country regardless. Thank you very much. Have a
Thanks
good
very
night.
much. Have a
Thank you.
good one. Karen, thank you. Appreciate it. We'll make notes and see. We need to. get some-
It is definitely on our radar and separate from Howell Street, we're very cognizant of the issues on certain streets in Ossining that were really not built for cars probably in the first.
I'm not
place.
sure that the whole village is built for almost 30,000 people. And so many cars and buses and vans and everything else. So it's a challenge and it's an old 1800s village. for the most
Yeah.
part. So I think we get that. Appreciate it. Martha?
Is there anybody that's virtually online that would like to say something? Jamie, do you see anybody?
I would suggest the person that has their comment, we aren't taking comments via the online system. If you want, you can raise your hand and we can time you and you can have your name put into the record like you suggest. Mr. Rinaldi, did you want to raise your hand? You did say I could say your name.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
that's it. Time's up. Can we, what's the next on the agenda?
Village Board resolutions, approval of voucher detail November 2nd, 2022. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austin hereby approves the voucher detail report dated November 2nd, 2022 in the amount of $2,646,791.23. Do I have a motion?
So move. Second.
Any comments? Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Finance budget modification for fiscal year 2022, budget adjustment for health insurance. Resolved, the 2022 general water and sewer fund budgets are modified to increase various appropriation accounts and to appropriate excess revenues for unanticipated expenditures for health expenditures projected to the end of the year as summarized by the village treasurer. And whereas total estimated costs for the expenditure accounts are under budget requiring adjustments, now therefore be resolved. Expenditure and revenue account budgets are adjusted as follows. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Comments?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Preferred developer status Market Square and Main Street parking lots. Whereas the Village of Austin Village is the owner of multiple tax parcels located on the south side of the intersection of Main Street and Spring Street property, known as the Main Street and Market Square parking lots, having the following tax identification numbers. Main Street parking lot 89.19-4-91 through 89.19-4-92, 89.19-4-98, and 89.19-4-99. The Market Square parking lot 89.19-4-38, 89.19-4-39, and 89.19-4-40, 89.19-4-41, and 89.19-4-43. And whereas New York Village Law Section 1-1021 provides that the village shall have power to take, purchase, hold, lease, sell, and convey such real personal property as the purpose of the corporation may require. And whereas in furtherance of the public interest and under the authority of Village Law Section 1-1021, the Board of Trustees Board wishes to investigate conveying the property for redevelopment and to work collaboratively with the developer to redevelop the property in accord with the community's vision. And whereas in May 2022, the village issued a request for site concept and developer qualifications, Market Square and Main Street parking lot sites, which document detail the following development principles. Site layout that includes a significant public plaza that can continue the long-standing use of Market Square as a center of public activities and events, a project that strengthens the mixed-use nature of the downtown and increases foot traffic within the downtown, a project that includes an active first floor use that will contribute to the downtown, a project that is compliant with the underlying zoning, village center zoning, and/or downtown form-based zoning, project design that employs architectural designs that complement the adjacent historic Main Street architectural design district, a project that considers streetscaping and the pedestrian experience. Parking on site will be provided to the maximum extent practicable to meet demands of the new project, and a parking garage off-site on two nearby contiguous surface parking lots over the village will be constructed to accommodate the balance of the parking requirements. It is anticipated that the successful developer will collaborate with the village in a public-private partnership on the financing and construction of the parking garage, assuming roughly 250 parking spaces in support of this development and other downtown parking needs. And whereas the village wants to formalize a relationship with one of the responding developer groups to provide for a period of exclusivity to allow for facilitate due diligence and further actions toward the finalization of an next plan, redevelopment, and the drafting of a term sheet. Now therefore be resolved that the Board of Trustees authorizes the village manager to enter into a letter agreement designating WBP Development LLC for 80 Bedford Road, Chappaqua, New York, 10514, and St. Catherine Group Incorporated, 181 Westchester Avenue, Portchester, New York, 10573, as a preferred developer for the development of the property, and be it further resolved that the term for the preferred developer status will be 180 days, which term can be extended by mutual consent of the village and the preferred developers, and be it further resolved that the board further authorizes the village manager to sign other documents to facilitate the preferred developers' due diligence, and be it further resolved that the board further authorizes the village manager to commence negotiations for the drafting of a term sheet and plan for development of the property, subject to approval by the board and review by the corporation council. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any comments?
Yeah, Stuart, period of exclusivity,
Yes, sir.
that is the 180 days?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
That's the similar that we have with the.
Right, that rang a bell.
I'm not sure if anybody else has
Yeah,
any
I'm
questions.
reading, there's a bullet that bothers me, but go ahead. I want to read it again. All right, sorry about that.
It's okay. So I'm assuming if the board agrees to this, I guess my question will be more like to Karen, on this one. Is that at some point of time, of the presentation that they were given to us, when do you think, again, with the caveat that if they all agree into this, when do you think we can have a revised or some sort of presentation by them so it can be shared with the public as well?
I think if the board wanted, we could have their presentation that they provided more recently done early, and that might be a good way to kick off announcing it. And also working out our plan for public engagement, the way we did for 30 Water Street. So really, I think depending on the nature of detail that you want in that presentation, the developer could be ready to do the presentation that he did before.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, part of, I think the presentation, there were some modifications that I think I want to say, at least I would like to see, obviously, before it goes to a public, but that's just me. I'm not sure if the rest of the board feels the same way, but, we don't want to present something that the public will feel that that's what we are presenting as an official proposal for it, even though it may morph into something else. But like the previous project, when we did do on 30 Water Street, it was pretty much very minor stuff that was presented to the public before we did any engagement. So the modifications through the process, it was very minimal from the original to what is being from the planning or zoning board.
There's a range of ways we could design the presentation to not mislead anybody, because in recognition, because we're talking about this publicly, the developer's presentation was conceptual, so any renderings were not necessarily dictating a final design, but there's other ways to convey that information without necessarily demonstrating the same draft renderings that were used in the presentation. We can go back to I think that in the original presentations that we did for 30 Water Street, we talked about the architects specifically who talked about elements of the design. I think that, again, we can make it a more general presentation to announce this and talk about some of the elements where community engagement and board, engagement are required. So it really is, it may be, or it may be better to work on some of the things that we need to do as a board to get this going, and then have community engagement and a presentation at that point. It really is, there's multiple ways you can do this.
So we could conceptually put out what they did and mark it as, this is, you know what I'm saying? I'm just, I want to be ahead of it with the public.
I think that it's okay to frame it. I think that, you always have a challenge when you show something visually, they may not read, so you're always balancing. I think we can do a good job at, describing it. If you don't have some sort of rendering, then it makes people very concerned because they don't have a sense of scale and people are visual. So I think it's something that we should probably talk about and maybe work through with the developer. They may have some suggestions because they do this in communities like Portchester, where they may have some suggestions about how they think it might work. We've had a very good working relationship with Wilder Walter on public engagement, and did some pretty intense public engagement around 30 Water Street, including 6 webinars, if you will, that are still on our website now, that are pretty comprehensive. I think that St. Catherine Group is equally available to do that kind of engagement. So perhaps we can talk to them and get some ideas, and then discuss it internally before we determine the best way to make sure that we're conveying what we want to do, where we're flexible on the project, and what the must-haves for the project are. So we set expectations realistically.
Mayor, it's like a little bit of a like catch 22. In some way, what Deputy Mayor is suggesting is we present to the public the point of view they have is, okay, this is our best case in front of them. They comment, they like, they don't like, they edit. The other way to look at it, from a public hearing perspective, is that we're gathering information from the public, which then informs us to make changes, including our own. Because now that we heard Joe Smith say something, we're suddenly going, wow, I didn't think about that. I need to maybe make some changes. The issue, so I'm like 50-50 on this, because, where do you start, right? Like, first you can show a pretty good case study and say, is the public good with it? For the most part. Or the other way of saying, this is really in the works. We're showing it to you all for input so that then we create a final piece. My dilemma is, and my experience is, regardless of how great the developer is, I think Walter and company are good, is that they tend to sell the job. I mean, that also is an issue because they want what they want to get approved. And I don't blame them. That's what I would do if I were presenting, right? I'm presenting something that is my best foot forward, my best case. I work on it for months. Like, I did my homework and I want the public to see it. And but that's not our role. Our role isn't to convince that this is the best case, unless we truly believe it, if that's something that speaks to us. So I'm sort of like, there's this, chicken and egg conversation about what, so I think if there is a way to say, the purpose of the public hearing is to get input. Changes and edits can be made, and people should recognize that and say it clearly. Not as an aside, not as an intro that nobody listens to because most people show up late or leave early and it's said at the end, but to actually maybe make it clear that the idea is, this is a big project. This is not like a little text change that may affect a lot of people, but nobody felt it. It's huge. Not sure people even understand where we're thinking of putting it, to be honest with you, even though we may know. So something like that explains what is our desired outcome from public meeting specific to this initiative, I think would be very important for me anyway. And I think that's a little bit, I may be reading into it. And obviously we want to show the best foot forward for all our sake, because why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't you take the best thing you could show with the most pictures, with the most explanation and public engagement? So, the balance I think is really important here, and I could see both sides of this.
From my perspective, the most important piece to start with is the language that's in the RFQ, because that reflects what the priorities are that we have discussed as a board, that are based off of the history of the space, that are based off of the needs that have been identified through various studies and commissions and groups. It's the manifestation of a lot of work. And so having that as a starting point is really important, because to your point, Mayor, what we don't want is to have the first introduction of this particular project to folks be, hey, we're looking to do something. Do you want to build a park, a playground, an amusement park? All ideas are welcome. That's not the point where we're at. And making that clear, I think, is really important. And not everyone will get the message, and we'll need to repeat it many, many times. But the reality is that the point where we're at, of having a preferred developer, they are responding to what we've already identified are our desires and what we're identifying as the best new use of this particular space, in concert with what's happening in other parts of the village. That this is also not an isolated project. It's a complicated message. My wish is that we have some sort of language, marketing language that is able to capture something like, or rebuilding Main Street, or what was it? It was urban renewal. It's like
Restoring.
or urban restoral. I don't know, but like something that's like, here's the vision. We're like restoring Ossining, something like that, and then this is a part of it. This is like the crown jewel of restoring Austin is restoring Main Street, but it's also some of these other pieces. And it may be that we're talking about the DRI, when it actually gets implemented, once the project get identified, then that's what we're calling it, that the DRI implementation is restoring Ossining or revitalizing Ossining or Ossining, whatever. That to me helps to frame where we are, where we're going.
You want to say something?
Yeah, it is interesting that Omar, what you said, actually, one of the things that was there that captured my attention as the reason why I kind of leave to the mic is the vision, like the vision of Austin. What are we looking for? And I think that, to me, it says a lot, because we've been talking about this portion of our village for years. I've been sitting here now, December will be 10 years, and we've been talking about this over 10 years. So the vision is there. So I think if we can tie that back into to everything that we're doing, what is our vision for the next 10 years? And I think that will capture what we're talking about. And I think it's difficult. I agree with the mayor and agree with Omar. And this is like, what are we doing? Because parts of the element of the RFP or RFQ that we send out, those are the elements that we put together from all these studies or all these conversations or all these vignettes that has happened through the past at least 5-6 years that we've been getting engagement for the community, and that's what we got. So I think that's something difficult, but I think not impossible. So I think we can, I'm sure you guys can figure it out.
Right. No, I think we're down to agreeing. I would also be hesitant. Some of the 30 Water Street will very much run by the developer. So I think we just have to be a little bit careful about who's presenting and the picture they're presenting and do it. Everything's like a learning curve. I don't think it was bad. I think we could just do a little better. And words are going to be really important. Is it housing project? Is it really a downtown project? Is it a business development project? I mean, we really are going to have to your point, name it and really, and that's going to be important for what it is. We said, oh, it's the DPW site, because part of that is that there was a piece of land sitting with a lot of stuff on it. So we're better for having housing than a piece of land with a stream that overflows. This is different, middle of our village, economic development. There are a lot of other words. It is not the same project at all, and I don't think it's about housing. I think it's about the downtown and development, which includes a bunch of things, right? And it includes walkability, a lot of things that are said here, but this is like jargon. I mean, we do need to get like the right flavor. So I think we're in agreement, right? We're in the middle of a vote, right? You're going to do a great job explaining to people, because that was a seller for me, by the way, this weekend, explaining the project to someone to say, one side of the street has stores, but the other side has like Verizon lots and nothing. And it's very uneven. And so it used to have two sides of the street, and people then they would go to stores and they could walk across and all of that. And it really fills in and it restores rather than something totally new, because I actually used to have that there. That's going to be very helpful. I think the light bulb went on when I spoke to the person. So I think that also your knowledge about the history, I think will be very helpful as well in this perspective to that. So I think all these things will add. We're good?
I'm good.
Thank you, Martha.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Karen, a question, I'm sorry. So the paragraph, I don't usually see this. The village manager to sign other documents to facilitate, that's like an open door. Is that usual that we put that in? Like, what other documents would you be signing?
Specifically, the term sheet, but all of these things would be dependent on a discussion.
That's on the next paragraph. That's why this caught my attention.
Yeah,
That the board further authorizes the village manager to sign other documents. Are you imagining other documents that?
I'm imagining there may be as we go through this, and I think that was the intent of the language. So again, even if you authorize me to sign a term sheet, I'm not signing the term sheet until you agree to the term
Okay,
sheet.
that's
So
what,
it's just
okay.
a blanket coverage in a sense that I'm the one who will be signing the documents. It does not mean that those documents will not be
Well,
reviewed by the board.
Right, so
in
just for the record, I'm
advance.
gonna ask that anything that's of you'll use your best judgment, but we need to see it, et
yeah,
cetera.
there's-
The term sheet is a given that we're gonna see it.
Yeah, but that would apply to any substance, anything that requires a decision or a substantive change in
Okay,
downtown.
great.
So no worries there.
Martha, as you read the next one, I think it's supposed to say 2023 budget.
Don't worry, we got that, yeah. Call for public hearing on the Village of Austin 2023 budget. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austin hereby calls for a public hearing to take place at 7:30 PM on November 16, 2022 at the Municipal Building, 16 Croton Avenue, first floor, Boardroom, Austin, New York, to consider the Village of Austin's 2023 budget, and be further resolved that the members of the public are invited to attend a public hearing and present at the above referenced location. And be further resolved that for those members of the public who want to attend such participate in the public hearing remotely, access will be available via the Zoom platform. And resolved, the comments regarding the Village of Austin's 2023 budget will be accepted by the Board of Trustees at bot@villageofaustin.org. Resolved that the Board of Trustees, my apologies. That's it. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments? I think we've already discussed this. Ready for the vote?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Okay. Approval of planned waterfront special permit for 30 Water Street. Whereas by letter dated June 22nd, June 22, 2021, and February 23rd, 2022, WBP Development LLC, WBP, by its engineering consultant, Inside Engineering, Surveying, and Landscape Architecture, PC, requested a planned special waterfront permit from the Board of Trustees for the property located at 30 Water Street, having the following section, block, and lot tax designations: 89.19-6-27, 89.19-6-28, 89.19-6-28, 89.19-6-29, 89.19-6-22, and 89.19-6-26, and the PW-B Planned Waterfront Central Waterfront Zoning District. And whereas Village of Austin Code Section 270-23I, Planned Waterfront Special Permit provides in part applications can be made for a special permit allowing for increased density in the planned waterfront districts based on the procedures outlined in Article 11 for parcels composed of at least 3 acres. An applicant may apply to the planning board for one or more density bonuses in exchange for providing amenities to the Village of Austin. And whereas Village Code Section 270-53 states, pursuant to the provisions of the Municipal Home Rule Law, the Village Board reserves the approval authority for special permits for certain uses. Such use represents such diverse benefits and impacts on local land uses as to preclude specific descriptions and standards for their approval. The Village Board, in considering any application for a special permit hereunder, will exercise such discretion in the legislative matters so as to ensure that the public health, welfare, and safety are protected and the environmental and land resources of the village are most efficiently utilized. And whereas the application for a planned waterfront special permit was referred to the Village of Austin Planning Board, for the planning board recommendations pursuant to section 270-54 of the code. And whereas on September 28, 2022, following all requisite proceedings before the planning board, which included a thorough analysis of the proposed project under the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQRA, in the issuance of a negative declaration, the planning board submitted its positive recommendation for the approval of the planned waterfront special permit to the Village Board. And whereas a duly advertised and notice public hearing was conducted by the Village Board on October 19, 2022, at the Municipal Building, 16 Croton Avenue, and via Zoom, at which time all those wishing to be heard were given the opportunity to address the Village Board. And whereas no member of the public appeared to address the Village Board at the public hearing regarding the application for a planned special waterfront permit, and whereas pursuant to the general municipal law in section 270-54H of the Village Code, notice of the public hearing accompanied by a full statement on the matter under consideration is given to the Westchester County Planning Board. And whereas upon motion, the public hearing was closed on October 19, 2022, and whereas on October 21st, 2022, the Westchester County Planning Board issued the deferred review noting in part the proposed development is consistent with the county's planning board long-range planning policy set forth in Westchester's 2025-context for county and municipal planning and policies to guide county planning adopted by the board on May 6, 2008, amended January 5, 2010. It is recommended strategy set forth in patterns for Westchester. The Land and the People adopted December 5, 1995, because it would add new higher density development near a train station and within walking distance of a number of commercial uses. We are supportive of the inclusion of the publicly accessible community space as part of this development, especially the extension of Sing Sing Greenway Trail through the site. Now therefore be resolved, the Village Board of Trustees acknowledges the Planning Board's SEQRA determination and recommendation letter on September 28, 2022, and hereby approves the application by WBP Development LLC for planned waterfront special permit for 30 Water Street. And be it further resolved that in accordance with section 270-54F of the code, this approval shall expire within 18 months of the date of approval unless a building permit has been issued for a special permit use or an extension has been granted upon a separate application to the village board. And be it further resolved that pursuant to section 270-54D of the code, this resolution shall be filed in the office of the village clerk and a copy mailed to the applicant. Thereafter, the applicant will proceed with site redevelopment plan of court approval before the planning board. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Are there any comments? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Are you voting yes, Diane?
Yes, I am.
Okay, opposed? Okay. Determination that planned development of 30 Water Street is consistent with the village's local waterfront revitalization program, whereas WBP Development LLC has proposed a redevelopment of a 3.4 acre site property at 30 Water Street in the village of Austin, Village PWB Planned Waterfront, Central Waterfront Zoning District. And whereas the redevelopment of the property is to include the following: remediation and soil cleanup at the site resulting from the former Austin manufactured gas plant. Such cleanup to be facilitated by having the site accepted into the brownfield cleanup program. Construction of an 8-story mixed-use building with 9 units of affordable housing of 30% to 80% of the Westchester County AMI with rooftop terraces and amenity space. 3,558 square feet of neighborhood retail space. 3,740 square feet of community space accessible to the village. Parking for residents. Construction of LEED standards. Construction of a second building at the site to be a parking garage on 4 levels. The first 3 levels to complement the parking at the main building, providing parking for building residents. The 4th level of the parking garage for the village to use for municipal parking. Permitting public space along the Sing Sing Kill to create a linear plaza/park in the center of the site. Extension of the Sing Sing Kill Greenway through the site connecting to the linear plaza park, thereby completing a pedestrian connection to the village to the Austin Metro North train station. And whereas one of the purposes of Village of Austin Code Chapter 262 Waterfront Consistency Review is to ensure that the proposed private and direct actions are consistent with said policies and purposes of the local waterfront revitalization program LWRP. And whereas Section 262-3 of the code provides in part all private applicants must comply with this chapter to the extent applicable prior to carrying out or approving or funding any type 1 or unlisted actions. And whereas the village's planning board is lead agency pursuant to the State Environmental Quality Review Act SEQRA determined that the proposed redevelopment of 30 Water Street was an unlisted action and issued a negative declaration. And whereas the Board of Trustees Village Board is responsible for determining the consistency of the proposed redevelopment of 30 Water Street with the village's LWRP. The Board of Trustees shall determine consistency with the LWRP of those actions which require Board of Trustees approval, including a special permits and zoning changes. And whereas as part of the consistency review process, WBP Development LLC prepared a coastal assessment form CAF, which along with other relevant information was forwarded to the Environmental Advisory Council EAC for the EAC's review and recommendation pursuant to Village Code Section 262-5D. And whereas the EAC reviewed the proposed redevelopment project at its June 7, 2022 meeting and discussed the proposal with the developer's representatives. And whereas on June 14, 2022, the EAC issued a letter of recommendation finding that the proposed redevelopment is consistent with one or more of the LWRP policy standards. The AEC further recommended the following: A mitigation plan to keep invasive species from emerging downstream. B, follow the village's protocol for tree removal and replacement. And C, care to be taken to minimize damage to property from flooding and to address sewer overflows at the Water Street Junction. Now therefore be resolved that pursuant to Village Code Section 262-5F1 and 2, the village board determines that the proposed redevelopment of 30 Water Street by WBP Development LLC is consistent to the maximum extent possible with the village's local waterfront revitalization programs, policy, and standards. And be further resolved that pursuant to Village Code Section 262-5H, the village clerk shall maintain a file for the proposed redevelopment of 30 Water Street, including this consistency determination or recommendation from the EAC. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any comments?
Martha, one thing, I picked it up myself, I apologize. On the, where you have the bullet points, where it talks about the construction of an 8-story mixed-use building, that, let's just change that, that should be 109 units of affordable housing, not 9 units of affordable housing. That will be officially changed in the record, but let's just have it clear for tonight.
The entire 30 Water Street is all affordable, 100% affordable of 109 units, just so the public understands. Normally, we talk about 10%. This entire initiative is all affordable.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Adoption of policy for recording in village-owned buildings. Resolved, the Village of Albany Board of Trustees hereby adopts the Village of Albany policy for recording in public buildings, recording policy, and be it further resolved. In accord with the policy annexed here to, appropriate signage will be located in village-owned buildings, and be it further resolved, the policy will be posted at all village-owned buildings in areas that are open to the public. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Karen, do you want to comment on that?
This is an important policy, and it's being put in place so that we have a position that we can use when we're dealing with First Amendment auditors who are looking to make sure that we're all doing our job and being as transparent as possible, while also protecting the rights of residents and employees. As sometimes, many times, there are departments that it's not appropriate to have anything filmed because there's access to personal information, social security numbers, any number of things that the public also trusts us to treat confidentially. So this is a way to ensure the rights of everybody, to preserve transparency in government, but make sure that we're doing it in a way that we're very, very clear about what is appropriate to be recorded and what's not, while not prohibiting people from public buildings in a way that would indicate that these are not public buildings, if that makes sense. So.
Thank you.
If I may.
Oh, okay.
No, just to add that, I did watch the work session from last week, so you guys touched a little bit about this the topic. So I guess one of the things that I believe, from my recollection is correct, obviously it's not just passing a policy, but it's also, for me, is about training in how do we deal with, staff dealing with persons that will come into a building and trying to invoke this First Amendment process itself. So I think it's education on internally as well as externally as well. So if that makes any sense, and obviously because this is a public building and we do have two bodies of government, part of that is not just a village, but is also a town process. So I think that's a coordination that, I'll leave that up to you guys to figure that out. And training, obviously, to me is very important, and communication to the public in general is very important as well.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We have the training template well underway, and, of course, we'll discuss it with you before doing so, but we're happy to share it with the town and anyone else who might benefit from what we want to circulate to our staff.
Sorry, I apologize for this, Mayor and board members, but is the town doing something similar to that effect? Even though this is a village-owned building, or they don't have to create?
In terms of the training?
No, in terms of like adding, because obviously the village owns the building, so we are passing a policy as governmental owners of the building, I guess, itself, so they don't have to do anything in that regard.
With signs, so.
Besides the signs.
Right,
I'm
so the policy being passed, and Stuart, please correct me if I'm wrong, protects or outlines the rules that would apply to town offices within village buildings, should they want to craft their own policy based on ours or otherwise. For town occupied town buildings, they're welcome to do so. But for example, the third floor of this building, as well as the clerk's office, they are covered by the policy since it's a village-owned building in which they operate.
And that would be the same process to obviously the community center, because there's some offices in there, and obviously the ops center, because we do have another town sort of share of process in as well. Okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Adoption of flag raising policy on village-owned properties, whereas following the decision of the Supreme Court of the United States in Churchill versus City of Boston, Massachusetts, the Board of Trustees discussed the need for a policy establishing guidelines for the exhibition of flags at flagpoles village-owned property. And whereas requests have been received from groups requesting permission to fly flags from such flagpoles. Now therefore be resolved that the Village of Albany Board of Trustees adopts the attached flag raising policy for all village-owned buildings, including the municipal building, police court facility, Joseph J. Caputa Center Community Center, John Paul Rodriguez Ossining Operations Center, Indian Brook Water Treatment Plant, and the following firehouses: Ossining Fire Department Headquarters, Hollow Hose Company number 5, Cataract Hose Company number 2, Monitor Hose Company number 4, and Northside Firehouse. And be further resolved that the fundraising policy will be permanently posted in each of the aforementioned village-owned buildings. Do I have a motion?
So move. Second.
Stuart, I don't have I can't get the policy. My phone is dying. What is the policy?
The policy will be that, first of all, as is required in all these policies to make it very clear, the Board of Trustees will declares that flagpoles located on village-owned property are not intended to serve as a forum for free expression by the public. Neither this policy, the village's choice of which flag to raise, nor the manner in which the decision is made should be interpreted as designating the flagpoles on village-owned property as a public forum. There will be an application process whereby individuals will submit an application to the village manager. That application will be looked at for completeness sake, and the ultimate determining authority is the Board of Trustees. There will be a limit as to the amount of time the flag can be flown, when the flag can be flown, and the board has the ability to reject the application if it wants. It can. It can also grant the application. There's also provisions that really there should be only one application by one group per year, so that we're not having multiple applications. And so it's a fairly comprehensive policy. It follows there's a policy from Massachusetts, also the San Jose policy, which was in fact the one cited by the Supreme Court in the recently decided Shirtleff case. So it essentially says that you just don't have the ability to fly flags. You have to, you make it clear that the determination as to what flag to fly rests with the municipal board.
If we pass this, what process do you all recommend for removing flags that obviously there are already flags flying on flagpoles everywhere. Some the village put up and others people put up. So is there a process to remove?
Well,
Or do we just call people up and say, we notice the flag, remove it?
if there are flags flying on village flagpoles other than the US flag, let's say the village flag and or the state of New York flag, those flags should come down unless and until the board approves the flying of those flags.
Okay. So somebody's gonna write to all our properties, all those listed here and explain all of this, because I'm somehow sure that they're not all watching tonight. If we pass this.
I just have one question. Does this apply to flagpoles in our parks?
Yes, any village-owned property,
Okay.
any village-owned property.
Okay. So, we're in the middle of a vote, right? Anybody else have any comments, questions? Would you do me a favor as well? We had an interest from a group that is using our model for conversations in the Hudson Valley in an organization. Once we pass, we don't pass, I don't know where we're going. Could you also send this to them? And if they have any questions, I don't want to mention names because I don't think
No
people are
problem.
comfortable when I mention them by name.
Happy to.
In the public forum here.
Sure.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Termination of probationary employee. Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the chief of police, the village of Ossining Board of Trustees hereby terminates the probationary appointment of employee 7202, last 4 digits of social security number, effective the close of business November 3rd, 2022. Do you have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Any comments? I just want to, and Stuart, you can discuss this. We had some, we don't do chatter on people either raise their hand and speak or and get called, or they don't get to speak. And they have to do within the right time of the agenda that we've been stating for years and years. But I would like for the record an explanation why numbers are used and that these are matters of personnel so that it's in the record.
That is correct, Mayor. We're not identifying, we do not identify the individual, we do it this way.
Okay. Martha?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Additions to fee schedule, train station parking daily rates. Resolved that effective October 1st, 2022, the following fees be added to the 2022 Village of Austin fee schedule. Train station daily parking, Quincy Street, West Lot, $1 per hour, Monday to Sunday, except for federal holidays, max 24-hour stay. Pay through Passport App Zone 91413. Quincy Street, East Lot, $4.75 per day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, except federal holidays, paid to the Passport App Zone 91414. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, a motion.
Well, like, it's getting late.
It's getting late, it's getting late. Okay,
I moved it.
Second.
got it. Okay, all those, no, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, got it, thank you. Continued business of the board, we have vehicle use policy, by village manager Karen DeCory. Corporation Counsel Stuart Gahan and Assistant Village Manager Manny Zaha.
So we've gone all the way through here, and I just realized that trustee Fritchie asked that this be put on, I think, sooner, right? Did you want this sooner in the agenda?
No,
Was the
no,
visitor
no, I was,
recognition?
the visitor rec, just
Oh,
so,
okay. We just visited.
just for the record,
So it's
since
not
we're
on the-
on, what are we on? New business or continuing? Well,
Okay.
continuing, for anybody that didn't notice, we moved visitor recognition up to the beginning of the meeting because it was the consensus of the board that it just didn't seem right to have our public sitting here listening to these lovely agenda items throughout the whole meeting and waiting an hour or two to speak. So hopefully this bolsters people to come out maybe a little earlier in the evening, come talk to us. So I appreciate everything that happened and things getting moved.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't want to do now, we're running late. We have a lot to do. We are going to go into exec for matter of personnel, one matter of personnel, just with our attorney. So I'm letting the trustees know that. So what I'd like to do is just have you all thank the board of whether we should, going forward, maybe do that in the beginning rather than the historical way of doing this at the end, where sometimes people do sit here for 2.5 to 3 hours just to sort of say their 3 minutes, you know, on all sorts of topics. And so just something to think about. I just want to move us forward, but maybe next week or so we could discuss and add that in as appropriate. Okay, it's a policy change, not legislative, by the way. Okay.
Hey, thank you. I think the Perillos are very glad they came tonight. The vehicle use policy, so when we're going through towards the end of the year, our checklist, looking through all the things we have to do, we know that this is something that's come up. In fact, it comes up a lot. It is actually quite a complicated policy, and there's many different facets on it. We found if we want to do this successfully, because it has been attempted several times in the past, we believe breaking it down into chunks makes it most efficient and makes it most likely that we'll end up with a revised policy that really reflects our needs and addresses these issues associated with village-owned vehicles and village-used vehicles by employees more comprehensively. First and foremost is the issue of vehicle safety and compliance to make sure that it's something our insurance companies require. It's something that is incredibly important to maintaining the safety and well-being of everybody. Most of it's very obvious. I think that most people understand that when they're driving a village vehicle and when they're driving their own vehicles on village business, that they are obligated to comply with the rules of the road, so to speak. But we do want to talk about this more specifically, and Maddie has been doing some work on this, so I'm going to turn it over to Maddie and Stuart to chime in to discuss the safety elements of our first step in revising the village vehicle use policy.
Sure. Thank you, Karen. You know, at the end of last week, I had sort of envisioned this conversation going a little differently. We, as Karen mentioned, have been looking at this since January of this past year. And we did not realize that in fact, we did not have a resolution for the safety component, which was discussed back in January. So when we started sort of diving into the weeds about some of the more difficult pieces to unpack about this policy, we realized that, you know, due to some oversight and other things coming on the plate, that we had neglected to close that loop. So I kind of sort of want to go out of order. We had put this under continuing business, but I think if it's okay with the board, I'd like to jump to the section about vehicle policy that's under new business. And the first agenda item is the adoption of Village of Austin driver safety agreement.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Adoption of Village of Austin Driver Safety Agreement. Is all the Village of Austin Board of Trustees adopts the Village of Austin Driver Agreement for elected officials, employees, volunteers, and contractors operating village-owned and non-village-owned vehicles on village business. Do I have a motion?
So, second.
All those in favor?
I have a question. This is from the previous safety thing we did in
Mhm.
January. This is not what we're looking at right now.
Okay, if I may, so I have a couple copies, that we had circulated around. So this is something that our personnel director, Marissa Rockison, had presented to the board in late January of this year. This is the same exact document as what the board generally had consensus on at that point. There are a couple things that we needed to clarify. Stuart had. Sorry, there was a bet. Stuart had some ideas on some additional language, specifically about the use of mobile phones while operating the vehicle. But as Karen mentioned, most of this is generally common sense, that anyone who's driving one of our vehicles or driving on the village's behalf is agreeing to follow New York State vehicle and traffic law, as well as not smoking in the vehicle. So that's something that is allowed, but that the village, you know, for obvious reasons, would not prefer. So this is exactly the same agreement. I actually went back and watched the video of that meeting, so I took note of some of the mayor and deputy mayors, you know, very specific questions, and, you know, we made sure to reflect them here, as well as follow up with our insurance company to make sure that we answered those questions. So to Trustee Fritchie's question, yes, this is exactly the same thing that Marissa had presented with a couple of small clarifications and additions. It just was never formally adopted by this body.
Okay, I'm still on a question. Bullet point, third from the bottom, agree immediately, 24 hours, notify those personnel
Mhm.
running involved in accidents or receive any traffic citations. So, fire department wise, where does the fire department fit in here with our members responding in their personal vehicles? We've had discussions, I've discussed with Karen, I've discussed with Stuart, and I believe these are very valid questions. And since it popped up on the agenda, I've been hearing about it all week. So I think something really needs to be carved out for the fire department, police department, you know, whatever. The personal vehicle thing becomes a little sticky. And then I have a couple questions. Where does the fire department fit in? Do all the members of the fire department need to sign this? And what happens if 100% do not comply?
I'm not sure if that's a question for me or a question for Stuart, but I just want to make sure that I understand correctly. The bullet in your initial question was about if I'm involved in any accidents or receive any citations in my personal or village-owned vehicle. That was the first one that you wanted to address?
Yeah, so I get a speeding ticket. That's on me. My personal
This
vehicle.
is only specific to
Village vehicle.
the village. If you're driving a village vehicle and you get a speeding ticket,
Right.
we need to know about that.
Right.
Both the cars-
Well, that's not what it says.
But that's not,
Okay, but only on village business. So if you're driving your own car and you're going upstate and you're speeding on the thruway or there's
right, but
something,
if I'm responding to an alarm and I get pulled over and get a speeding ticket,
you would
am
still.
I technically on village business?
Right, and in that case, all you're doing is making aware. The fact that you're responding to an emergency doesn't necessarily preclude the fact that you didn't get a ticket, but it gives us coverage when we're dealing with the implications of getting that ticket. So it makes it easier, and if I'm speaking, Stuart, please say. So anything that you're doing driving a village vehicle, it is just while you're the village vehicle goes without saying. These are things you need.
Yeah,
to
I'm more
report.
concerned about
If you're-
personal vehicles.
So your personal vehicle, these only apply when you're, for the fire department, it only applies to when you are responding to a call.
Mhm.
If you are speeding because you're responding to a fire, we're gonna like not consider that a violation the same way you were speeding to get to, a destination quicker on the weekend.
I understand.
So there really
It's
doesn't
just the way
need,
it's worded that we need to report that.
Yeah, the language
That's
could
my
use a
ticket.
tune-up if that's the
right, so
intention,
I
yeah.
think that, but I think that you would still want to report it. Because that would acknowledge that we know about it, we know the context of it, and that would give you an extra layer. I would think that would be a benefit unless I'm missing something.
I don't see it as a benefit personally, it's a personal thing at that point. Yes, I'm responding to a call and if I get,
What typically happens but wouldn't you, if you're responding to a call and you're driving to a fire, right? So, and I would think that that counts as, if you contest the ticket, it gives you an excuse.
Right.
If the village knows about that, that only reinforces your ability to do that. Am I missing something?
No. Just to be clear that responding to a fire, while listen, people will use a tremendous amount of discretion, there's no waiver of the vehicle and traffic law. So I'm not sure that I've seen in my career a cop pull over somebody responding to an alarm.
right, I'm just making a point.
Right. So I think the rub is, I'm only going to speak to enforcement, that there is no waiver of the vehicle and traffic laws. If you got pulled over, that's a matter of whether the board wants to be notified of that. But that's all I got.
Yeah, because
I'm just, yeah, again, I'm
I
thinking
think it
that,
just needs to be clarified more. I just, because to me, it creates a problem. Why would I have to tell you I got a speeding ticket when I was driving to a fire? First of all, I'd be embarrassed, but second of all, it has no bearing on the village board. It has no bearing. It's a personal thing at that point. Yes, we're technically responding as a fire department member. And to the chief's point, a lot of discretion is given throughout the village and, you get pulled over, you did something pretty bad. So, but the point is, that's on you. It's not a village vehicle, it's a personal vehicle. So I don't see why I would, if I got pulled over and I got a ticket, I'm gonna, Karen, she said, I was going to fire last night and I've got a ticket speeding. Really? That just doesn't even
right,
compute to me.
I
That's
understand
what
what
I'm
you're
saying, we need
saying.
the fire department is gonna have to be carved out in this.
Oh, I mean,
The idea, if I may, Mayor, is it's all village business,
Right.
regardless of whether it's personal vehicle or village-owned vehicle. The end of the day, it's village business, which both from a risk perspective, we need to know. But also and from an insurance perspective, we need to know. It may well, now, we also, and Maddie knows this, we have what's called the lens system. So we know a lot, when a lot of these tickets come through, we know them anyway, by virtue of that, by virtue of being in the lens system, which is the state system for reporting violations. But it's more a matter that if you're operating a vehicle, personal vehicle, be it rented, loaned, whatever, or a village-owned vehicle in particular, and you're on village business, and village business has a wide definition here because we have a large volunteer fire department. We're just asking that we be notified that that has occurred. If it's your personal vehicle, so yes, you'd have to go to village court if that's where it is, or town justice court, and you'd argue the ticket or whatever. But again, it's village business, that's why.
Okay, so
I'm sorry, Mayor, can I just say one thing? I just want to make clear, this would apply to everybody. So while there's probably a greater excuse if you're in the fire department, and you're responding to emergency, if we're talking about not wanting to know it, I think the implication for people who are not going to emergencies or are speeding is that the having to report a ticket is far more embarrassing. But it is important because if there was a consequence associated with speeding or anything else, that if there was a question of coverage on this, that really is the intent of this. So it's not a punitive matter, it's merely reporting it. It's I think very well understood that there's a possibility that somebody doesn't realize you're going to a fire and you get a ticket. I think everybody would say, well, you were going to a fire, you rate, I think if you were going to White Plains to have a meeting and, it was me or Maddie or somebody else and we were speeding, we'd have to report that too. And I think we wouldn't really have much of an excuse for that. So it is universal, but I think the implications are not necessarily different for anybody based on the policy.
Okay, and
It's all, I mean, I don't know if you need to carve it out because I think it says volunteers. So the level of volunteerism may be different, but we have lots of people who volunteer. You're saying that anybody that's like, I don't know, doing something for an event who's a volunteer would have to do that as well. They would have to sign this and do that. And my question is, why is it when you get a ticket rather than when you're found guilty? Because if you have a ticket and it's thrown out, then does that really matter? I don't know how that works.
That's actually how it works in the lens system. So until
What is the
someone,
lens system?
it's the New York State DMV local employer notification system, I think is what the
I see.
acronym stands for. And so basically, if you're driving on village business, I mean, currently today as an employee, if a village employee is driving on village business and it's expected that that will be a part of their role as an employee here, when they're hired as part of the onboarding process, we have them sign a form that says you can put my driver's license in the lens system. So that's something we're already doing for paid employees. But basically what would happen is if I were to be driving and I got a ticket,
Right, your
we
personal
wouldn't be
car.
informed immediately. We would be informed when I went to court and then it would be entered that there was a judgment, against me. I'm sure that terminology is wrong. As opposed to what is implied by this policy, which is, hey, I need to go downstairs and tell Marissa last night on my way home, I got a speeding ticket, where otherwise she would know it eventually, but not for 3 months.
If you are in village business in your personal car.
Right.
It goes without saying that if you're in our property, you have to do that.
Absolutely.
Because you're driving, the
Village
village
property.
property. But if it's your personal car and you got pulled over for whatever, drunk driving, going to a red light, whatever, you're saying whether it's a volunteer doing a project and it's a known, like something that we had asked somebody to do, me driving my car, etc., my personal car, and I'm on business for the village, not just driving around and getting a ticket. And is this the desired outcome here is what? So we're not having this discussion that we started in January and now doing in November, is from the insurance company requires it, requests it, it does something, like what is the whole purpose here?
It's for informational purposes for us.
Mhm.
And insurance companies ask more and more about this, particularly with regard, not as much with emergency vehicles, it does come up, but they do ask for history with regard to tickets, with regard to people who are driving on behalf of village, on behalf of the village. So it's important that we have that information. The ticket gets dismissed, then there's no problem. I mean, then it's fine. We don't even worry about it. But I think that the important thing is to know, because what often happens is lens system isn't perfect, so you may not know if there's a conviction, or it may be for goodness knows how long. This is just a notification system. It's just to basically have the record of that. I will also say that if you have an employee or a volunteer who is driving and gets multiple speeding tickets on village business, even if they don't have a trial date for 6 or 8 months, I, as an attorney here, would like to know that person is no longer driving a vehicle for the village, even if they haven't been convicted yet. Because the bottom line is, if they're piling up tickets, there may be a problem.
Well, Mayor, to your point, just before that, about what is really the goal here. I think that, and Stuart was kind enough to share, we have a pretty massive dossier of information from not only the village's adopted policies, but also past failed attempts in the village predating everyone in this room to pass a different kind of policies from neighboring communities. This is a heavy lift. And so as Karen mentioned, we know that this is going to be complicated to discuss for a variety of reasons. So in order to get a foothold, we wanted to find the least controversial element and try to be able to at least say, okay, Section A is done. Section B, we'll see you in January. Section C, maybe July. We know that this is not going to be something that happened overnight, because I think Stuart had shared with me the last adopted version of this policy was 2011, and there are 2 undated skull and crossbones, abandoned efforts that he was able to find in the interim. So we know this is not going to be easy, but the goal of sort of restarting this conversation is to, again, get whatever foothold we can, so at least we can start making progress towards an eventual comprehensive policy.
And the other thing that trustee Pritchett asked is, what if somebody doesn't sign it? You need 100% participation, or can you get 75%? And only those people can drive or go or volunteer. Like, so if somebody, I mean, look, if you get onboarded and you refuse to sign certain things, you don't get hired. You know, it's basically, sorry, like, nice knowing you, right? But the flip side of that is, if you've already been here 10, 15, 20 years, and now you're being asked to do something, you know, we have to figure that out. Not, it's with all policies. So 2 questions were asked. One, does it have to be 100% of everybody who's currently here? Because I think the onboarding is easy, actually. And 2, what if somebody doesn't want to sign it? What do you do? Like, it's easy with a volunteer, because you could say to a volunteer, thank you. No, but our fire department is actually made up of volunteers. They volunteered, like, on their own is one thing, but you're talking about 100 people, maybe more. So how do we, anybody give thought to that? I mean, that was what I heard is 2 questions that came up.
I can totally see that point. You know, like we've sort of discussed, I think, but for the exceptions for emergency responders that trustee Fritchie's made reference to, there's really nothing in here that's too objectionable. Certainly not for anybody who's paid by the village. It basically says, don't speed, don't smoke. Make sure you lock the car when you're through with it. I mean, it's pretty common sense stuff. So I think we can sort of take back this feedback and discuss if maybe we can make some modifications, and then maybe revisit this at the next board meeting under continuing business.
Well, you're also gonna have to figure out the last 2 points, which is always a struggle when you have volunteers and or employees, and how you manage that.
Mayor, it's not in here, but my own opinion, everyone should sign, number 1. If they don't sign, they certainly cannot operate a village vehicle. Simple as that. As to their own vehicle for village business, they shouldn't be authorized to use their vehicle for village business, because they haven't signed it, they can't do it. I mean, that's all. But certainly as to village vehicles, that's like, you know, but, and we don't have that in here, and perhaps it has to be listed as one of the bullet points, that if you don't sign, this is what's going to happen. I agree with you that as for onboarding, it's easier because the person's just going to sign. But I think that those people who, you know, now are in that position would have to sign. And if they don't, their ability to, you know, operate village vehicles or operate vehicles on village-owned business should be prescribed.
I think you'll find it a lot easier with village owned, because it's
Sure.
not, okay, it's the personal stuff. So either there has to be a different format, which means if you want to go to something, you may not be the one driving your own car. But I think I think 90% is the easier part. The police also, do they always use just police cars? They don't go to anything in their own cars, do they? Are there volunteers that use their own cars?
We had auxiliaries that would, no, generally all the driving is to headquarters, and then anybody would be in a village.
Right, they go to headquarters.
There may be rare occasions where someone's sent away for training and takes their own vehicle and be looking for reimbursement. I don't see, I understand where people come from, where they'd be concerned about this, but for my liking as paid employees, if you're going somewhere and generally if you're taking your own car, people are looking for the reimbursement for the mileage. If you're getting the rate, then you're driving for us, so.
You're driving, and I think it's events. There's also events, and that's also, you're actually on village business, even if you're going to celebratory events, eating, drinking, whatever. You know, those are also village type business, some of them, not all of them, but some of them. We go to training, I guess, for Nikon, that's a village business. I use my own car when I'm gone. You guys use the village cars, same rules, I guess.
Whatever
I'm
we
just
send
running
people
through
to,
some of this stuff.
whatever
yeah.
we send people to, we give them the opportunity to take a job car. If they take their own car, that's by choice. So that's why I'm saying it's a little bit different for us, because they always have the opportunity to take a village vehicle when they go.
Right, okay. I feel like we're not actually going to pass this. I feel there's a couple
Can I just make one point of clarity?
Yeah.
The bullet point below it with the insurance. So just to clarify publicly, the insurance part of this is the pager goes off, we're responding to a call on our vehicle, I go to get the truck. We're covered from the village as long as we have our own liability insurance on our own vehicles. Doesn't mean our insurance is gonna get touched. It will be covered through the village, all right? And if you're driving without insurance, you're not recognized and you're on your own.
No, but
No?
need
Oh,
to
I
be
thought
clear
you
on
did it.
something.
Right.
If you're driving your own vehicle, and you want the village policy to be involved, you must have minimum coverage of 250,000 for property damage, 250 individual, and $500,000 aggregate. The only way the village's auto policy will come into effect is if you have that underlying policy, and the village will be excess to that policy if it's your personal vehicle that's involved.
I don't know, Steph, I think I'm asking the same question, but that's only if you're driving your own vehicle. So if I drive a village vehicle, so if.
Village-owned vehicle is absolutely covered by the village's policy.
Right, that was the question. So if you have an employee that doesn't own a car, therefore it doesn't have insurance, they can still operate a village vehicle.
As long as they have a license, sure.
Right, driver's license.
He's talking.
I'm talking about responding to a
Something else.
call.
Yeah.
But
We got
the
you.
understanding is that the pager goes off, we're covered under
The
village
only thing-
insurance,
the only-
as long as we maintain our
No.
insurance.
You are not. You're not covered under the village's insurance. A personal auto is not a covered vehicle under the village's auto policy. It is not a covered vehicle.
But to be clear, so then there may have been misunderstanding on my point, Bob, when we spoke earlier. But the point is that that's true with or without signing this policy. That's not, the signing the policy doesn't change that.
That's correct. That's our auto insurance.
So you know, if I misspoke, is that the ability for the villages, if you're in an accident, for the village's policy to kick in is going to be compromised if your car's not insured or you were texting while driving or anything not in the policy. But none of this really changes like what's in place now, what has been in place since the beginning of time. So it's not that the policy is changing, it's just documenting in that regard. So nothing's changed, but I may have miscommunicated that.
If I'm understanding Stuart correctly, I'm going to get the truck and I get T-boned by somebody. It's not even my fault. I gotta go through my insurance.
Yes.
But that's always been the case, based on the policy. That's never not been the case. And it would continue to be the case whether or not you sign the policy. What the issue is that if there was an element that you were working, then if there was an excess required by the village, then the village can cover it as long as you're in compliance and weren't doing something you weren't supposed to be doing.
Just kind of piggyback on this, and I get your point, Bob, in regards to the fire department. I totally understand, I respect that a lot. But at the same time, let's say I was coming to a board meeting and I'm running late, and I don't want to be late, sure, and I get into an accident. It's gonna be the same problem or the same issue in a way, if I get a ticket or not. If I'm in Austin or coming from another part of Westchester, it's gonna be the same thing. So do I want to carve that out into this policy? Do I want to start creating different pockets of a policy? I mean, we have to be realistic and at some point, sure. If we're going to create a policy, we want to make sure that we're treating everybody as an equal. We are here to pretty much do as a balance. What is the balance that we're looking for? And if we don't find that balance, then we're not going to get anywhere. I mean, what Maddie was saying is like, we're going to start with point A, but we're not even at that level at this point. We're like negative A at this point.
I was just gonna say, I can feel my foothold slipping away, but.
Okay, so let me understand this. The policy we've always had is exactly the same. If I am going, I'm a volunteer, let's use the volunteer fire department. fire's there, the T-bone example, on my way to the truck at the firehouse. I go to my insurance first. I can't go to the village because
You're not a covered vehicle.
I'm
under
not
the
a covered
village's policy.
vehicle. And that's always been the case?
Yes.
And how many requests, how many times have we been asked to cover anybody in that scenario? I don't mean the T-bone, I mean,
I have not gotten a request on behalf of any personal vehicle to be covered in the event of an accident like that.
So
we've never gotten it, but it's been like this. This is not actually a change to our insurance policy. Once I'm in the vehicle and something happens, right, then it's covered. So the use of
Again.
personal vehicles to go, and even in the village vehicles, you're only covered if your personal insurance is in good standing, or whatever the standing
Well,
is.
No, but to get back to what I believe someone said, that if you have, what the chief said, if you don't own a car, so you have no insurance, but you have a light driver's license, you could drive a village-owned vehicle. You don't have to have insurance because you wouldn't have insurance, you own a car. But just to be clear on the point I was making, you are correct that if a personal vehicle being operated for village business is involved in an accident, it is that owner's policy that comes into play. The village's policy can act as excess to that if the owner of the car has certain required limits, policy limits. If they meet those limits, then the village could act as excess coverage. If they don't, then it's fully and completely the other person. So,
fully, completely.
meaning that the village would not come in whatsoever at all. But what I can tell you is this: the village's policy has a list, they identify by number covered vehicles. Non-owned vehicles of the village are not covered vehicles. It's as simple as that. So if the village doesn't own it, we don't cover it, and or the policy doesn't cover it. So if you were driving a village vehicle to an emergency, it's simple, village's coverage comes in. You're driving your own vehicle to an emergency, you have an accident, pure coverage. You are, let me put it this way, you're the primary insurance.
Your question about insurance though, and on your personal vehicle, it's not stated in the policy, but technically it's included. That if you do have a vehicle, you do have to maintain your insurance at whatever level current, whether you use it for the village or not. If you don't pay your insurance, they suspend your driver's license, which then in a circular fashion comes back around and is included in the policy. So you do have to pay your insurance bill.
I think for this policy, just to be clear, if we don't codify this, we run into problems later. In the rare event that something happens, again, I want to qualify rare event. So this isn't something, that typically happens that we need to even address, but it's insurance. So it's for that rare event that we need to make sure that we're covered. For the vast majority of things on here, they're all implicit. I think the only thing that maybe creates something different than was before, aside from actually physically have to sign it, without physically signing it, basically everything holds true regardless. It's all common sense, and we, those of us who drive village vehicles know that you can't smoke, that you can't do all these things. We know all those things anyway. The only changes that I think would put an additional onus on people that doesn't currently exist today is having to report a speeding ticket if you're driving your own vehicle and you're a volunteer. But other than that, and physically signing the document, I don't think there's anything that changes anything. Rather, it solidifies it and codifies it so that gives us greater protection as a village. It gives greater protection to those of us who work in the village, those of us who are volunteers, and it ensures that we don't have liability that would impact the taxpayer because we didn't check this box. So nothing really more is being asked here. And I just think that's important because that's why we thought this was sort of low hanging fruit.
Okay, so
What's our next look? I mean, I worked in a private company where you know, I use my own car for business all the time, I got reimbursed, etc. But I did get hit. I had to pay for it. It's, you know, their feeling is, you know, you have a responsibility in how you drive. You have a responsibility, that's why you have insurance. We reimbursed you, whatever it was, for wear and tear, etc. So it's not like it surprises me. I don't know if people understood that that's been the case, if we're being truthful, all these years. I'm assuming we looked at how other municipalities also do it. Is this very typical of insurance policies and volunteer fire department? Well, the police don't seem to have a problem in volunteers.
It is consistent in other policies. Our policy, our auto policy also has provisions that if an emergency responder's vehicle is broken into, there is property damage coverage that they have under our policy, which would be above and beyond what the individual might have. But these are consistent I mean, this is what the coverage has been. I would have to go back and look at, you know, the prior policies when we had a different carrier. But I can tell you that even in the prior policies, non-owned vehicles were never covered.
I guess I have one more question. And this is probably an outlier on this, but so if you're in the police department, where there's a very rare expectation that you're going to be taking your own car. So you sign the policy expecting that you're never going to drive your own car, and then somebody, are we to just prohibit them from taking the car, or does signing this assume that they're actually increasing their insurance cover? If somebody has lower insurance rates, they never think, so like, to what extent is this fall on management to check people's insurance, or are we just going with?
If I just feel like we're maybe going down some rabbit holes. I think one of the issues would be if we weren't, and so please clarify, if for some reason somebody didn't have sufficient insurance or other things, it would exclude them from any excess protection from the village.
Right.
It wouldn't necessarily increase our premium.
But it's an employee risk to sign it and then drive their car without having the premiums they promised to have.
Unless
to
the, you know.
our responsibility to check their insurance cards.
No, if they didn't have it, it sounds like they don't get the excess if they need it.
The
It's on
chief is
them.
correct. The mayor and the chief are correct. If the person doesn't have those minimum numbers, which are above the state minimum, let's be clear, you could actually have far less insurance and still be allowed to drive. But if you don't have that, then the village's automobile insurance would not get involved whatsoever, would not act as excess.
The excess, your insurance will pay for what you have.
But again, that is true today, correct?
No,
Yeah.
my question was more
Nobody
to the
just did.
responsibility of management to check people for the things that are sworn in there. Are we
No,
doing this?
it's
and
their
then thinking-
responsibility.
No, it would be their
That's all
responsibility,
it is.
yes, yes.
You're gonna say to them, you need to have this insurance, you may not have this insurance, but if something happens, it's all on you. You're gonna have to go to, like you would any other accident, you don't have enough insurance, you get sued, you're paying for it. We will do excess if you meet this criteria.
Okay, where are we with this? You had suggested, I'm sorry, you had,
Suggested, that there's some, maybe some clarification, because there were 3 points that were brought up. The last, right?
Well, Maddie, before you answer that question, I guess to me, the question is the board, because Maddie asked to read this so we can pass the resolution here. So is the board, so the question is to the board, is the board agrees to this resolution as it's part of the policy, so we can just move on to the next point that Maddie was trying to do at the continuing business? So, or do we want Maddie to go back with Stuart and make carbon or additional modifications to this policy or this agreement? So that's a question that I have to the board, not to Maddie, not to anybody else, but to the board.
My feeling is, and I'm fading fast, my feeling is that it sounds like there's some pieces that should be relooked at, particularly the bottom pieces, that to ensure that they align with both our intention, but then how it's practically going to be used. And then you can present it again, and then we can present it.
I agree.
Yeah, the only issue is gonna be the piece about if people don't sign. I'm not sure I would go exactly away, so you guys might wanna think about that. But if that's what you're gonna recommend, then we'll have to vote on it. What else we have? So it's being, are we in the middle of a vote?
Yeah, so are we tabling this?
Yeah, I move we table.
Table,
Select
yeah.
this table, yeah.
Okay. So can I have a motion to table?
I move we table.
Need a second?
Need a second?
Let's sort of vote.
All those in favor of tabling the resolution? Opposed? We are on to new business of the board, authorizing increase in annual salary for assistant village manager. Whereas village charter section C3-5C provides the village manager may appoint an assistant village manager who shall perform the duties and assume the responsibilities of the village manager during his or her absence or inability to act. The assistant village manager shall have such duties as may be assigned by the village manager. The board of trustees shall fix the assistant village manager's salary and other terms and conditions of employment not inconsistent with the provisions thereof. And whereas the village manager appointed Mani Zahat as assistant village manager with assigned duties and responsibilities. And whereas the village manager intends to increase the assistant village manager's duties and responsibilities to include oversight for the operations of the village's building and planning department. And whereas with these new duties and responsibilities, the building inspector and village's planning consultants will report to the assistant village manager. Additionally, the assistant village manager will be responsible for establishing processes to improve operational efficiencies, including but not limited to building and planning coordination, permitting, building and planning, code enforcement, interdepartmental/public communications, project management, and coordination with other village departments. And whereas the assistant village manager shall undertake these additional duties and responsibilities immediately. And whereas the village manager has determined that the assistant village manager's increased duties and responsibilities warrant a salary adjustment. Now therefore be resolved that the effective immediately, the 2022 salary of the assistant village manager is fixed at $149,663, and be it further resolved that further annual increases in salary shall be based upon the annual increases contained in the village's contract with the Civil Service Employees Association or as otherwise determined by the Board of Trustees. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Comments?
I'm just very happy. Thank you, Maddie.
Stuart, my comment is gonna be the CSCA, does not go into effect immediately because we do it on January and I'll talk about Maddie in a minute, but it needs to be adjusted so she doesn't get that as well in January.
That wasn't made clear to me.
Okay.
Right, that's why I'm bringing it up this moment.
To add that, but.
You understand, right?
I understand.
This, I'd just like to take a moment for,
We're gonna do that in a minute, give us a
Okay.
chance. I
So this is
think
just
Stuart is
the-
right, it was not made clear
it
to
was not
him.
made clear,
And
but
I read it,
it should be.
right, I read it a few hours ago and I realized that. I don't think it's a problem. It just needs to be changed. That effective, it will become, effective this year, she's not getting the raise plus the 2.5. That,
Frozen through 2023.
okay, there we go.
Future annual increases commencing on January 1, 2024.
Correct.
Thank
You
you.
just add, as
Yes.
so added.
Correct.
Great,
Perfect.
that's so added.
The only piece that I would add is usually you would say, well, why not just make it an even number? 1.96, like, why not just? But my
It's
understanding
an
is
even number in the increase, actually.
that's so the increase is an even number, but then it'll be an even number, but then after the adjustment after 2024, the 2.5, then evermore it'll be a weird number.
Yeah, but Dale's good with that. She likes weird
We
numbers.
all have weird.
Yeah.
Like weird.
Anyway, if I could start, I'm sure others have the same. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. We don't often do this. I think it's well deserved, obviously, or this was discussed. You know, I told you like earlier, I only had 2 words, which was thank you, because I've learned from one of Maya Angelou's great stories is it's actually a Jewish proverb that when you get up in the morning, you say thank you to God. It's really one of the highest things you could say to anybody. I'm not putting you at the level of God. I don't want you know, for you to walk out, we still have to have you. But it is, those words are used often in our society, but I truly mean it. And I thank you especially, we had a strategy going in, beginning like, you know, something I really wanted when I became mayor is to get more real grants, not 10,000 and 20 and work our tushies off for that, but actually get meaningful grants that are transformative. And I think the reason we have it is a lot of teamwork. Stuart, Dale, Jamie, you know, every department head. It's a teamwork, but I do think one of the points of differentiation is your focus on it, that you, I believe, have a master's degree in planning. You know, it all comes together. And I appreciate, and when the village manager is not available, that you really do jump in. So all of that is very much appreciated. And we hope like to see great things in 2023 from you, and the adjustments also to the in your actual role and the growth and managing people, I think will be really cool. So I thank you for that.
And also 2024, 2025.
I'm waiting, I'll do that next year. I don't know if anybody else has comments.
Yeah, I'll just say that I'm also very grateful. You defy math. It's 1 + 1 = 3. How somehow you produce more than just the two of you. And we're really grateful. You make us look really good. The village is at a much better place because of all the things that the mayor said with the grants and everything else. Thank you. You know, we don't do it for the money, but it don't hurt. And so the way that we can recognize you, this is one way that we hope to continue to do so in the future. Thank you so much.
Well deserved, Maggie.
I echo everybody's comments.
You know, short and to the point. We like that. Okay, well, thank you. And is there anything? We're in the vote.
Yes. All those in
Now we
favor?
have to vote.
Aye.
Okay, now can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting for, to executive session for matters of personnel?
So moved.
Second.
You go to vote.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. It is, I can't see with the new clock. What is that, 10:30? 10:32. We hope to see you again next week. Have a lovely evening.
Mayor,
Oh,
budget meetings if they want to watch next week, but there's no work session next week.
oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, no. It's budget meetings. You have the schedule. There is no work session next week. Thank you,
It's a great
Stu.
opportunity to binge watch.
Yeah, exciting stuff, folks. No, actually, some people love this stuff. I shouldn't, let's not make fun of it. Some people love this stuff. So thank you, and we're adjourned.